Hello guys. Welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash was a power-hungry trainer who sought to capture Arceus itself. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Obsidian Pikachu. The air in the chamber was so cold it felt like shattered glass against the skin. Ice, jagged and cruel, clawed at the walls, covering the Grand Indigo League emblems in a layer of frost. At the center of the frozen arena, a Jinx lay motionless, its opulent red dress and golden hair frosted over, a statue of defeat. Across the battlefield, a small, yellow creature stood with its back to Ash Ketchum, its long, black-tipped ears twitching at the silence. It wasn't the silence of anticipation. It was the silence of a tomb. Lorelei of the Elite Four was on one knee, her breath misting in the frigid air her own Pokémon had created. Her glasses were askew, and her usually composed face was a mask of disbelief. She wasn't looking at Ash, but at the creature he commanded. What is that thing?" she breathed, the words barely audible. Ash didn't answer. His gaze was fixed, his posture relaxed but radiating an unnerving stillness. He wore simple black cargo pants and a fitted gray Henley, practical and devoid of any flair. There were no badges on his jacket, which he'd left slung over a chair at the entrance. He didn't need them. He had walked through the gates of the Indigo Plateau, presented a single, unofficial medallion forged from meteorite iron, and demanded his challenge. His reputation had preceded him, a wave of whispers and fearful rumors that had granted him the audience he sought. His Pikachu's tail, shaped like a lightning bolt, twitched once, then twice. Unlike the cheerful companions of other trainers, this Pikachu was a weapon. Its fur was a slightly deeper shade of yellow, almost gold, and its eyes held a piercing, intelligent crimson glow. The red pouches on its cheeks didn't just spark, they smoldered with latent energy. "The match is over," Ash said, his voice calm and even, yet it cut through the cavernous room like a razor. "Concede." Lorelei flinched, not at the command, but at the sheer lack of emotion behind it. She had faced hundreds of challengers. Arrogant ones, passionate ones, desperate ones. She had never faced one so empty. He didn't seem to be enjoying his victory. He didn't seem to feel anything at all. It was merely a step, a transaction. With a shuddering breath, she recalled her Jinx in a flash of red light. The silence returned, heavier this time. She finally looked up, meeting Ash's dark, unreadable eyes. "You will not succeed," she said, her voice regaining a sliver of its usual icy authority. "Whatever you're planning, Lance will stop you. He protects the balance of this world." Ash's expression didn't change. A flicker of something, perhaps amusement, or perhaps just cold analysis, passed through his eyes. "Balance is an excuse for stagnation," he replied. "I'm not here to disrupt the balance. I'm here to redefine the power that maintains it." He turned without another word, his Pikachu leaping onto his shoulder in a fluid, silent motion. The creature didn't nuzzle him or make a sound. It simply settled, its crimson eyes scanning the frozen chamber as if cataloging every weakness, every stress fracture in the ice. As Ash walked towards the heavy stone doors leading to the next chamber, they ground open before he reached them, the League officials on the other side scrambling to anticipate his every move. He left Lorelei kneeling in the ruins of her own battlefield, the cold seeping into her bones long after he was gone. The hallway was a sterile, brightly lit corridor of polished marble, a stark contrast to the elemental chaos of the battle chamber. League officials in crisp uniforms scurried past, their faces pale, their hushed words echoing in the unnaturally quiet space. They gave Ash a wide berth, their fear a palpable thing in the air. He ignored them, his focus already on the next challenge. Bruno. Predictable. Powerful. And utterly beatable. A portly man in a suit, one of the League's top administrators, hurried to intercept him, a nervous sweat beading on his forehead. "Mr. Ketchum," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "The rules stipulate a 10-minute recovery period between matches." Ash didn't break his stride. "I waive it," he said, not even glancing at the man. "But your Pokémon are ready," Ash finished, his tone leaving no room for argument. The administrator swallowed hard and scurried away, barking orders into a headset. Ash knew what they were thinking. They saw a monster, a prodigy of destruction who had appeared from the mists of Pallid Town with a team of apex predators. They had no idea of the years he had spent in seclusion, not training, but studying. He had devoured ancient texts from the libraries of Celadon and Cinnabar, cross-referenced Sinnoh mythology with Johto legends, and learned the fundamental mathematics of Pokémon energy transference. While other children were learning about type advantages, he was learning about the resonant frequencies of dragon-scale armor and the cellular decay caused by ghost-type energy. This wasn't a challenge, it was an equation he had already solved. The doors to Bruno's chamber hissed open, revealing a cavern of rock and stone. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like teeth, and the floor was uneven, unforgiving terrain. In the center stood Bruno, a mountain of muscle with a stern, focused glare. His Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee stood at his sides, their bodies coiled springs of raw physical power. "So, you are the boy who fights with shadows and ice," Bruno's voice boomed, echoing off the stone. "Here, you will find only fists and fighting spirit. There is nowhere to hide." Ash stepped onto the rocky floor, his Pikachu still perched on his shoulder. He reached for a Pokeball on his belt, his movements economical and precise. "I don't need to hide," he said, his voice just loud enough to carry. "You're the one who's exposed." He tossed the Pokeball. It opened with a soft click, and from it emerged a Gengar. But it was not just any Gengar. This one was larger, its shadowy form seeming to drink the light from the room. Its grin was wider, more menacing, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence. It didn't cackle or bounce. It floated silently, a void in the shape of a Pokémon. Bruno grunted, unimpressed. A ghost to fight the spirit of the warrior. A foolish choice. "Machamp, let's go." He hurled his own Pokeball, and a four-armed behemoth materialized, roaring a challenge that shook the very foundations of the room. Machamp beat its four chests, a display of raw, unadulterated power. "Close combat," Bruno commanded instantly. The Machamp charge, a blur of gray muscle, its four fists becoming a storm of blows aimed at the floating specter. But Ash was a step ahead, he hadn't even spoken a word. The Gengar's grin widened. As the first punch was about to connect, it dissolved. Not into shadow, but into nothing. The Machamp's fists hammered through empty air, its momentum carrying it forward into a stumbling recovery. It was a move Ash had perfected. Not phantom force, not a standard teleport. It was a localized spatial distortion, a technique he'd taught his Gengar after studying the theoretical physics behind Porygon's dimensional travel. It was faster, cleaner, and nearly impossible to predict. The Gengar reappeared directly behind the off-balance Machamp. A sphere of pulsing, dark energy had already formed between its hands. "Now," Ash said, the single word hanging in the air. The shadow ball struck the Machamp in the center of its back. There was no grand explosion, just a sickening thud, like a hammer striking stone. The behemoth shuddered, its muscles seizing. It didn't fall. It just stopped. Its eyes were wide, vacant. The ghost-type energy hadn't just inflicted damage, it had severed the connection between the Pokémon's fighting spirit and its physical body. Bruno stared, his jaw slack. "What did you do?" "Severed its nerve clusters with a focused energy strike," Ash replied dispassionately, as if describing a simple mechanical process. "It won't be moving for a while. Your turn." He gestured to Bruno's other Pokémon. The Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee, Pokémon that lived for the thrill of battle, hesitated. They could feel the predatory wrongness emanating from the Gengar. The rest of the battle was a formality. It was a lesson in futility. Bruno's Pokémon were masters of physical combat, but they couldn't land a single blow. The Gengar was an untouchable phantom, appearing and disappearing at will, striking with calculated, disabling blows. A blast of sludge bomb to compromise breathing, a will-o-wisp to cripple muscle function, a hypnosis to end the struggle. It was a systematic dismantling, cold and brutally efficient. Within 5 minutes, all of Bruno's Pokémon were unconscious, laid out on the stone floor without a single visible scratch, their fighting spirits utterly broken. Bruno recalled his fallen team, his hands shaking. He was a man who had dedicated his life to the perfection of the physical form, to the purity of combat. And this boy had defeated him without even raising his voice, using a creature that felt less like a Pokémon and more like a tear in the fabric of reality. "You don't fight with honor," Bruno growled, his pride wounded more than his Pokémon. Ash looked at him, his head tilted slightly. Honor is a luxury for those who have already won, he said. He recalled his Gengar and, without a backward glance, walked out of the chamber, leaving Bruno alone with the silence and the suffocating feeling of absolute defeat. The next corridor was darker, the marble giving way to polished obsidian. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something ancient and dry, like dust from a forgotten tomb. Agatha was waiting for him, not in a designated arena, but right in the middle of the hallway. She stood leaning on a simple wooden cane, her elderly frame belying the immense power she commanded. Her own Gengar floated beside her, its familiar, mischievous grin a stark contrast to the silent void Ash commanded. Samuel Oak spoke of you, you know, she said, her voice a dry rasp. He said you had a fire. A passion for Pokemon unlike any he'd ever seen. He would be disappointed to see what that fire has become. Ash stopped a few feet from her, his face impassive. His Pikachu's ears flattened slightly, a low growl rumbling in its chest. Professor Oak taught me the fundamentals, Ash said. I'm grateful for that, but he sees Pokemon as partners. Friends. I see them as a key to a locked door. And what lies behind this door, boy? Agatha pressed, her eyes narrowing. The power to do what? Protect the world. A noble, foolish goal. The world doesn't need a protector, Ash countered. It needs a new architect. The current one is far too hands-off. Agatha's lips curled into a semblance of a smile. It held no warmth. Blasphemy. You are arrogant. You think you can challenge the gods themselves? I don't think, Ash said, his voice dropping, carrying a weight that seemed impossible for his age. I know. A heavy silence fell between them. Agatha's Gengar cackled, breaking the tension. You have a powerful ghost, she acknowledged, gesturing with her cane towards the Pokeball on his belt. But mine has tricks you can't possibly comprehend. We're of the old guard. We understand the true nature of the shadows. The nature of shadows is to be consumed by a brighter light, Ash said, or a darker darkness. Shall we begin? Their battle was not one of power, but of subterfuge. It was a duel of phantoms in the polished obsidian corridor. Agatha's Gengar was a master of curses and status effects, a trickster that sowed confusion. It laid a curse on Ash's Gengar, tried to trap it with mean look, and filled the hall with a disorienting haze of confused ray. But Ash's strategy was on another level. He had anticipated every move. His Gengar used substitute, creating decoys that absorbed the curses. It used taunt to lock Agatha's Gengar out of its status moves, forcing it into a direct confrontation it couldn't win. The duel became a high-speed chess match of feints and counter-attacks. Shadow balls collided in midair, purple energy washing over the black walls. Agatha fought with the experience of decades, but Ash fought with the precision of a supercomputer. He saw not just the present move, but the next 10. He had studied Agatha's battle records, analyzed her tendencies, and predicted her every strategy. The turning point came when both Gengar were locked in a stalemate. Agatha, growing desperate, called for the ultimate ghost-type attack. Destiny Bond. She shrieked. A faint, ethereal tether of light connected the two Gengar. If Ash's Gengar knocked hers out, it would be taken down as well. A draw. A way to halt his relentless advance. Ash's lips curved into the barest hint of a smile. It was the first emotion he had shown all day. It was terrifying. You assume I want a Pokemon battle, he said softly. His Pikachu, which had been watching silently from his shoulder, suddenly moved. It didn't wait for a command. Its body became a blur of yellow. Before anyone could react, it launched itself from Ash's shoulder, its cheeks not sparking, but erupting in a contained, violent burst of black lightning. Pikachu, don't, Agatha gasped, realizing the ploy too late. It wasn't a Pokemon move, it was an intervention. The attack wasn't aimed at her Gengar, it was aimed at her. The bolt of dark electricity didn't strike her. It struck the floor at her feet, a concussive blast that cracked the obsidian and sent a shockwave through the ground. The blast was powerful enough to throw her off balance. Her cane clattered away, and she stumbled backward, her connection to her Gengar faltering for a split second. It was all the opening Ash needed. Checkmate, he whispered. In that instant of distraction, his Gengar's eyes glowed, and it unleashed a full-power psychic attack. Not at Agatha's Gengar. At the ethereal tether of Destiny Bond itself. The psychic energy didn't break the bond. It twisted it, warped it, and then, with a horrifying snap, reversed its polarity. The tether, now glowing a sickly green, lashed back towards its source. Agatha's Gengar shrieked as its own move turned against it, the energy of the bond collapsing inward. It convulsed once, then fell to the floor, unconscious. Agatha stared, speechless, clutching her chest. He hadn't just defeated her. He had broken the fundamental rules of engagement. He had targeted a trainer. He had corrupted a Pokémon move itself. This is not how it is done, she stammered, her face ashen. Ash walked past her, his Pikachu landing gracefully back on his shoulder. The rules are for those who lack the power to break them, he said, his voice echoing in the now silent hall. You have my respect, Agatha. You forced me to improvise. He didn't look back as he continued towards the final chamber, leaving another member of the Elite Four shattered in his wake. Outside, on the manicured lawns of the Indigo Plateau, the air was tense. Uniformed security personnel formed a perimeter, keeping back the news vans and the few curious onlookers who had heard the rumors. They weren't just for crowd control. They were watching for something else. In a nondescript van parked half a mile away, a man in a rumpled trench coat stared at a bank of monitors. His name was Looker, and his job was to investigate the things that didn't fit, the anomalies that threatened the quiet, unspoken agreements between the human world and the forces that lay beyond it. Right now, the biggest anomaly he had ever seen was inside that building. Energy readings are off the charts, a young technician next to him said, her voice tight with anxiety. The psychic burst from the third match. It didn't match any known Pokémon signature. It was almost perfectly stable, zero decay. It's not natural. Looker ran a hand over his tired face. Nothing about this is natural, Mickey. We've been tracking him for 6 months, ever since he dismantled the battle frontier. Every battle, the energy signatures get stronger, more refined. The source is the Pikachu, Mickey said, pointing to a wildly fluctuating graph. Every time it uses an electrical attack, there's a secondary emission. A sort of shadow frequency underneath it. I've cross-referenced it with everything in our database. Unknown radiation, dimensional residue from Hoopa's rings, even trace signals from ultra wormholes. No match. What does the Foundation say? Looker asked, his eyes never leaving the main screen, which showed a thermal image of the plateau. The champion's chamber was glowing with a terrifying intensity. Branch Chief Faba is concerned, Mickey said, choosing her words carefully. He thinks the boy might be an ultra beast infiltrator. Lusamine, however, she trailed off. The president has a different theory, Looker finished for her, a grim set to his mouth. The Ether Foundation, his secret benefactors in this investigation, were a strange and dangerously powerful organization. Officially, they were dedicated to Pokémon conservation. Unofficially, they were preparing for a war most people didn't even know was coming. Lusamine, their enigmatic leader, believed that the legendary Pokémon, the very gods of their world, were a threat too great to be left unchecked. President Lusamine believes the boy isn't from another world, Mickey confirmed quietly. She believes he's found a way to tap into the power of another world. The distortion world, specifically. She thinks the Pikachu isn't just a Pokémon anymore. She thinks it's a conduit. Looker's blood ran cold. Giratina's domain. The world of antimatter, of broken laws and chaotic power. If the boy was channeling that. On the thermal screen, the champion's chamber erupted in a silent flash of white-hot energy. The alarms on their consoles blared, a single, piercing shriek. He's started, Looker whispered. He's fighting Lance. The champion's chamber was a majestic hall of white marble and gold filigree. A grand throne sat on a raised dais at the far end, sunlight streaming through a massive stained glass window depicting the legendary birds, Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres. It was a room built for kings. Lance stood before the throne, his red hair like a flame, his black cape with its crimson lining giving him the appearance of a warrior prince. Beside him floated his Dragonite, its orange scales seeming to glow in the sunlight. Its expression was gentle, its eyes kind, but beneath the surface lay a power that could level mountains. It was the guardian of Kanto, the pinnacle of a trainer's bond with their Pokémon. I have watched your battles, Ash, Lance said, his voice resonating with a calm, commanding authority. I have seen your power. I have seen your cruelty. I must ask you, as the champion of this league, to what end do you pursue this path? Ash walked to the center of the room, The door's ceiling shut behind him with an ominous boom. He surveyed the chamber, his eyes lingering on the throne for a moment before meeting Lance's. "The end is the beginning," Ash said simply. "This," he gestured to the room, "the League, the world outside, is a system built on a fragile peace. A peace dictated by beings of immense power who rarely show their faces. I seek an audience with their creator, and I will not be denied." Lance's eyes widened in comprehension. "You seek Arceus." It wasn't a question, it was a horrified statement of fact. "You are a fool. To challenge God is to invite the destruction of everything. The balance maintained by the legendaries is the only thing that keeps our world from tearing itself apart." "You speak of balance, but I see a cage," Ash shot back, his voice hardening for the first time, a flash of the fire Agatha had spoken of. "Humanity lives in fear of powers it cannot comprehend, so it deifies them. I will not live in fear. I will control that power. And I will start with your dragon." The air crackled with tension. Lance's calm facade broke, his expression turning to one of grim resolve. "You are a menace, Ash Ketchum. Your ambition will be your undoing. Dragonite, this is not a league battle. This is a defense of our world. Do not hold back." The Dragonite let out a roar that was no longer gentle, it was a declaration of war. The stained glass window behind it trembled. Ash's Pikachu leapt from his shoulder, landing on the marble floor with a soft thud. It looked tiny, almost insignificant, before the mighty Dragonite. The smoldering red pouches on its cheeks began to glow, and the air grew thick with the smell of ozone and something else, something metallic and wrong. Black sparks, like tiny fragments of night, danced across its fur. "Dragonite, Hyper Beam," Lance commanded. The Dragonite opened its mouth, and a torrent of pure, destructive energy coalesced into a blinding orange beam that screamed across the chamber. It was a move that could obliterate solid rock, an attack that had ended countless championship battles. Ash didn't flinch. "Iron Tail," he said, his voice almost a whisper. Pikachu's tail began to glow, not with the silvery sheen of a normal iron tail, but with the flat, light-absorbing black of polished obsidian. It spun, a tiny, golden dervish, and met the Hyper Beam head-on. The impact was cataclysmic. For a split second, the two forces met, a supernova of orange and black energy. Then, the impossible happened. The iron tail didn't just block the Hyper Beam. It cut it. The beam of energy was split in two, shearing past Pikachu on either side and slamming into the far walls, leaving molten craters in the marble. Lance stared, his mind refusing to process what he had just seen. A physical move had just sliced through a full-power Hyper Beam. It wasn't possible. "My Pikachu's body has been reinforced," Ash explained, the cold smile returning to his face. "Its cellular density has been increased. It can withstand forces that would disintegrate a normal Pokémon." Before Lance could recover, Ash pressed his advantage, Volt Tackle. Pikachu became a comet of yellow and black electricity. It didn't just charge forward, it seemed to bend the space around it, crossing the vast chamber in an instant. Dragonite tried to raise its arms to defend itself, but it was too slow. The Volt Tackle slammed into its chest, and the Guardian of Kanto was thrown back like a ragdoll, crashing into the dais of the throne with a sound like a thunderclap. The battle that followed was a display of brutal, overwhelming dominance. Lance was a master strategist, a dragon master of legendary skill. He had his Dragonite use Dragon Dance to boost its speed, Outrage to unleash its fury, and Safeguard to protect itself. But none of it mattered. Ash's Pikachu was always faster. Its agility wasn't just speed, it was a short-range teleport, a flicker of movement that the eye couldn't track. It moved like a phantom, its obsidian tail a blur of black steel, deflecting, parrying, and countering every attack. It hammered the Dragonite with attacks that were both unnaturally powerful and chillingly precise. A thunderbolt aimed not at the body, but at the wing joint to disable flight. An iron tail to the knee to cripple its stance. The majestic chamber was destroyed around them. The marble floor cracked and splintered. The golden filigree was torn from the walls. The great stained glass window shattered, raining down a kaleidoscope of colored shards as Dragonite was slammed through it. Finally, the great dragon lay broken at the foot of the throne it was sworn to protect. It was trying to rise, its spirit still fighting, but its body was failing. It looked at Lance, its eyes full of apology. "It's over, Lance," Ash said, his Pikachu now standing on the Dragonite's chest, its tiny foot pressing down with impossible force. Black electricity crackled around it, waiting for the final command. "Why?" Lance choked out, his voice hoarse with despair and disbelief. "Why this hunger for power? What happened to you?" For the first time, a shadow crossed Ash's face. A memory, fleeting and dark. A stormy sea. A sinking ship. A desperate plea to a silent sky. A promise made in the heart of a tempest. "I learned a lesson a long time ago," Ash said, his voice distant, cold. "Mercy is a prayer offered to a god who never answers. Power is the only god that listens." He raised his hand. "Finish it." Thunder. A column of pure, concentrated lightning, black as the void, erupted from Pikachu. It did not flash and disappear. It descended like a spear, a solid, screaming bolt of obsidian energy. It struck the Dragonite, and the lights in the Indigo Plateau flickered and died, plunging the entire mountain into darkness. When the emergency lights finally flickered on, casting the ruined chamber in a ghastly red glow, Ash was standing before the throne. Lance was on his knees beside his fallen Dragonite, which was unconscious, its body smoking. The doors burst open, and League officials and security guards poured in, their faces a mixture of terror and awe. The portly administrator from before rushed forward, a velvet box in his hands. "Mr. Ketchum, by the laws of the Indigo League, you are the new champion," he stammered, holding out the box, which contained a golden trophy. Ash looked at the trophy. He looked at the throne. He looked at the broken man and the defeated dragon on the floor. He felt nothing. No pride. No satisfaction. This was just a stepping stone, and it had crumbled beneath his feet just as he knew it would. He turned his back on the throne. "I refuse," he said. A collective gasp went through the room. "The title of champion is meaningless," Ash continued, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. "To be the master of a single region is like a child declaring himself king of a sandbox. My ambitions are greater. I am not here to rule this league. I am here to use its resources, to access its knowledge, and to find my way to the Hall of Origin." He started walking towards the shattered window, the setting sun casting his long shadow back into the room. "You tell the other champions," he said, his voice carrying over his shoulder. "You tell Stephen Stone, Wallace, Cynthia, all of them. A storm is coming, and I am its eye." He reached the window and, without hesitating, stepped out into the open air. A moment later, a massive shape blotted out the sun, a Charizard, far larger than any on record, its scales the color of charcoal and its flame burning a brilliant, cold blue, swooped down and caught him. Ash settled onto its back as if he were simply sitting in a chair. He didn't look back at the ruin he had created. His eyes were fixed on the southern horizon, towards the distant shores of the Hoenn region, where the legends of the earth and the sea slumbered. His quest for the architect had just begun. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The whispers of Hoenn. The air in Hoenn was thick, a humid blanket woven with the scent of salt, rain, and blossoming jasmine. It was a stark contrast to the crisp, clean mountain air of the Indigo Plateau, and Ash felt the difference not just in his lungs, but in the very energy of the land. Kanto was old, its power settled and deep. Hoenn felt primal, volatile, a place where the earth and the sea were still locked in an ancient, simmering argument. It had been 3 weeks since he had left the Indigo Plateau in ruins. 3 weeks of the world's media spinning his story into a legend of terror and ambition. They called him the Obsidian Trainer, the champion who refused the crown. He had ignored it all. News was noise, and noise was a distraction. He had spent the time in transit not resting, but absorbing data, his Charizard flying high above shipping lanes while he cross-referenced satellite imagery of Hoenn's ocean trenches with scanned excerpts from the Lily Cove Museum's forbidden archives. His destination was Rustboro City, a monument of glass and steel built around the fossilized bones of an older world. It was home to the Devon Corporation, a company that had made its fortune by resurrecting the dead and harnessing the planet's energy. It was also, conveniently, the city where champion Stephen Stone kept his primary residence. Ash wasn't here for a battle, not yet. He was here for knowledge. The Devon Corporation's deep-sea mapping project, he knew, had inadvertently charted anomalous energy readings near Sutopolis City. Readings that matched the theoretical signature of a slumbering super-ancient Pokémon. He walked the clean, bustling streets of Rustboro, a ghost in the crowd. He wore a simple black hooded jacket, the hood pulled low, obscuring his face. His Pikachu was not on his shoulder. It was in its Pokeball, its unique energy signature shielded by a custom-built alloy he'd commissioned from a paranoid engineer in Saffron City. To the world, he was just another anonymous traveler. His first stop was a small, dusty bookstore tucked away in a back alley, far from the gleaming Devon headquarters. The sign above the door read, "Myths and Mysteries." Inside, the air was thick with the smell of aging paper and leather. An old man with a fringe of white hair looked up from a massive tome, his spectacles perched on the end of his nose. "Can I help you?" the old man asked, his voice a dry rustle. "I'm looking for anything you have on the land of origin myth," Ash said, his voice low and even. Specifically, local variations native to the Hoenn region. The old man's eyebrows shot up. "That's a deep cut, son. Most folks are content with the official histories. The tales of the red and blue orbs are considered little more than fairy tales now." "Fairy tales are just history that people have forgotten how to read," Ash replied, pulling a small, heavy pouch from his pocket and placing it on the counter. The clink of gold coins was unmistakable. It was pre-league currency, the kind used by explorers and treasure hunters, untraceable and universally respected in circles like this. The old man's eyes glinted. He looked Ash up and down, a slow, appraising glance. "You're not a student. And you're not a historian. You're a seeker." He pushed himself up from his stool and shuffled towards a rickety ladder in the back. "I have a few things. First editions, private journals. Not for the faint of heart. Or the shallow of pocket." An hour later, Ash sat in a sterile, anonymous hotel room, a dozen crumbling books and scrolls spread across the bed. He absorbed the information with frightening speed, his fingers tracing faded maps and crudely drawn images of a monstrous red beast and a leviathan of the sea. The official story was simple. Groudon and Kyogre, two immensely powerful Pokémon, fought, and were quelled by a third, green dragon from the heavens. The fairy tale. But the private journals of forgotten explorers told a different story. They spoke of human intervention, of two rival ancient civilizations, one that worshipped the land, the other the sea. They spoke of the construction of two artifacts to control the beasts, the orbs. And they whispered of a third group, a sect of sky worshippers who built a great tower to call down their god when the other two inevitably failed. The key, Ash realized, was not the Pokémon themselves. It was the trigger. The orbs. According to the texts, their last known location was Mount Pyre, a sacred place, a graveyard for Pokémon and a repository for ancient relics. But security would be high. And even if he could get them, awakening the legends was a messy, unpredictable business. It would draw too much attention, too quickly. He needed a distraction. He needed pawns. He pulled a small, encrypted datapad from his bag and began to type. His fingers moved with practiced ease, accessing the dark corners of the Hoenn information network. He had spent years cultivating digital backdoors, planting sleeper viruses, and creating false identities. It took him less than 20 minutes to find what he was looking for: the internal communications of Team Magma and Team Aqua. They were, as he'd expected, laughably amateurish. Their security was a joke, their ideologies simplistic and fanatical. Team Magma, led by the charismatic but short-sighted Maxi, sought to expand the landmass for human prosperity. Team Aqua, under the equally passionate and foolish Archie, wanted to expand the seas for Pokémon. They were two sides of the same worthless coin, so consumed by their own dogma that they couldn't see they were being played by the very legends they sought to control. They were perfect. Ash found the duty roster for a Team Magma cell operating near Philarbor Town. He identified their target, a meteorite fragment in Professor Cosmo's lab, which they believed could amplify Groudon's power. He then located a disgruntled Team Aqua admin, a man named Matt, who was growing impatient with Archie's slow, methodical approach. Matt craved action, glory. Using a heavily anonymized routing system, Ash sent two messages. The first, to a low-level magma grunt known for his ambition, was a simple data packet. It contained highly accurate seismic readings, which Ash had fabricated, indicating a massive energy source directly beneath Mount Pyre, with a signature that matched their simulations of the blue orb. The message was framed as a leak from a rival faction within Team Magma, designed to push this grunt to act independently, to seize the glory for himself and his cell. The second message, to the Aqua admin Matt, was more direct. It was a single sentence. Maxie's dogs are sniffing around Pyre. They think they've found your prize. He closed the datapad and leaned back, a cold sense of satisfaction washing over him. He had just thrown a match into a powder keg. Team Magma would rush to Mount Pyre, expecting to find the blue orb and perhaps ambush their rivals. Team Aqua, their pride stung and their paranoia ignited, would mobilize to defend what they believed was theirs. They would clash at the sacred mountain, creating a chaotic, public spectacle. The authorities would be forced to intervene, their attention focused on the two terrorist cells. And while they were all busy fighting in the graveyard, Ash would be free to walk into the now lightly guarded Weather Institute on Route 119, the true target of his interest. The institute didn't just study the weather, they monitored and attempted to control it. And their private research wings held the most advanced data in the world on abnormal atmospheric and subterranean energy phenomena, the kind of slumbering legendary Pokémon would emit. He didn't need the orbs, he just needed to know precisely where to dig. 2 days later, the news feeds exploded. A violent confrontation had erupted at the summit of Mount Pyre. Reports were chaotic, citing oddly dressed extremists, powerful Pokémon, and flashes of brilliant red and blue light. The Hoenn League was scrambling to respond, with Elite Four members Drake and Glacia dispatched to contain the situation. The champion, Stephen Stone, was reportedly coordinating the effort from Rustboro. Ash watched a news report on his datapad from a small cafe, a cup of untouched tea cooling in front of him. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. He paid for his tea and walked out into the afternoon sun, heading for the Devon Corporation building. It was time to meet the competition. The Devon building was an architectural marvel, a skyscraper of white stone and blue-tinted glass that seemed to touch the clouds. The lobby was a grand, open space, with a complete skeleton of an Aerodactyl hanging from the ceiling. Ash walked past the bustling employees and the gawking tourists, his eyes scanning, analyzing. He wasn't interested in the public displays. He was headed for the research archives, a place not on any public directory. He found it on the 47th floor, behind a door that simply read, Historical Preservation. The door was locked with a high-end biometric scanner. Ash placed a small, metallic device over the scanner. There was a faint hum, a flicker of green light, and the lock clicked open. A simple frequency cloner. Child's play. The archive was a large, circular room, its walls lined with temperature-controlled shelves holding ancient texts and artifacts. In the center of the room, a woman was standing before a holographic display, her back to the door. She was tall and slender, with impossibly long blonde hair that cascaded down her back. She wore a simple, elegant black dress and a matching coat. Even from behind, she radiated an aura of quiet, formidable power. She didn't turn around as he entered. The lock on this door is keyed to the biosignatures of only 4 people in the world, she said, her voice calm and melodic, yet carrying an undercurrent of steel. Stephen Stone, his father, the head of R&D, and myself. You are not one of them. That leaves 2 possibilities. Either you are the most talented lockpick since Team Rocket's Miyamoto, or you are the reason every champion from Kanto to Kalos has been on high alert for the past 3 weeks. She turned, and Ash felt the first flicker of genuine surprise he had experienced in years. He knew who she was, of course. Cynthia. The champion of the Sinnoh region. A prodigy in her own right. A master of mythology and one of the few trainers in the world considered to be in the same league as Lance. He hadn't expected to meet her here, now. His intelligence had indicated she was in Celestic Town, researching the time-space legends. Clearly, his intelligence was incomplete. Her gray eyes were sharp, analytical, and held a deep, unnerving intelligence. She wasn't looking at him with fear or anger. She was looking at him with the intense curiosity of a scholar who had just stumbled upon a creature that wasn't supposed to exist. Ash Ketchum, she said, her lips curving into a faint, unreadable smile. You're shorter than they say in the papers. And you're a long way from Sinnoh, Ash countered, recovering his composure instantly. He stepped further into the room, letting the door slide shut behind him. His eyes flickered to the holographic display she had been studying. It was a detailed topographical map of the Hoenn region, overlaid with complex energy readings. His eyes narrowed. It was almost identical to the data he was planning to steal from the Weather Institute. My research is not limited by geography, Cynthia said, following his gaze. When a tidal wave forms, you don't just study the beach it's about to hit. You study the earthquake that caused it. You, Ash, are an earthquake. I'm here to find the fault line. I'm not a natural disaster, Ash said, his voice flat. I'm a course correction. Is that what you call it? She took a step closer, her movements fluid and graceful. She was entirely unafraid. Dismantling the Kanto Elite Four in under 3 hours, breaking a man like Lance, and then refusing the power you fought for. That isn't a correction. It's a declaration. My question is, a declaration of what? That the old gods are sleeping on their thrones, Ash said. The words came out before he could stop them, a rare crack in his carefully constructed armor of apathy. Cynthia's smile faded, replaced by a look of profound seriousness. Be careful, Ash. Some gods do not sleep. And those you seek to replace are not known for their mercy. She gestured to the map. You're here for the same reason I am. The energy spikes. The legends of Groudon and Kyogre. You think they are a source of power you can claim. They are, he stated, not as a belief, but as a fact. They are a force of nature. Like a wildfire or a hurricane, she countered, her voice intense. You don't claim a hurricane. You survive it. The power they wield is not meant for human hands. Our world exists in a delicate balance, a balance maintained by these very forces. What you see as a cage, others see as the only thing preventing total annihilation. It was the same argument Lance had made. The same flawed, fearful logic. Balance, Ash scoffed, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. The balance is a lie. It's an excuse for the powerful to remain powerful and the weak to remain weak. I don't intend to be either. They stood in silence for a long moment, two apex predators sizing each other up in the sterile quiet of the archive. The air hummed with unspoken challenges, with the sheer weight of their combined ambition and power. Ash saw in her not an enemy, but a mirror. A different path, a different philosophy, but the same fundamental understanding of the world, that it was governed by power far beyond what most people could imagine. She chose to study it, to respect it. He chose to conquer it. You won't stop me, he said. It wasn't a threat, it was a statement of inevitability. I know, Cynthia replied, her expression softening into something almost like pity. But Steven will try, and unlike Lance, his foundations are made of sterner stuff. He will not break. He will simply endure, and his Pokémon will endure with him. You should not underestimate him. As if on cue, the door to the archive hissed open. Steven Stone stood there, his silver hair immaculate, his tailored suit uncreased. He wasn't flanked by security. He was alone. His calm, gray eyes, so similar to Cynthia's, moved from her to Ash. There was no surprise in his expression, only a quiet, heavy disappointment. Cynthia, he said, his voice smooth and metallic, like polished steel. I appreciate you keeping him occupied. He then fixed his gaze on Ash. The incident at Mount Pyre has your fingerprints all over it. A chaotic, multi-front engagement designed to draw attention away from your true objective. It was elegant, in a sociopathic sort of way. I've sealed the Weather Institute. You won't get your data. I don't need it anymore, Ash said, nodding towards the hologram that still floated between them. She does her research quite thoroughly. Steven's jaw tightened. So you came here to steal it? From my home? From my company? He took a step into the room, his hand reaching for the row of Pokeballs on his belt. I will not allow it. You are a threat to this region, Ash Ketchum. Your games with Team Aqua and Magma have put thousands of lives at risk. As the champion of Hoenn, I am ordering you to stand down and surrender. Ash felt a familiar coldness settle over him. The time for subtlety was over, and if I refuse? Then I will have to remove you by force, Steven said, his voice losing its smoothness, hardening into something sharp and dangerous. I was hoping to avoid this. I was hoping the rumors were exaggerations. But Cynthia was right. You are everything they say you are, and more. This isn't the place, Steven, Cynthia interjected, stepping between them. It's the only place, Steven said, his eyes locked on Ash. He's cornered. Now, Ash, your decision. Ash looked at Steven, then at Cynthia. He saw the resolve in Steven's eyes, the weary concern in hers. They were the gatekeepers, the protectors of the old way. And he had to tear it all down. All right, Ash said. He unclipped a Pokeball from his belt. But not here. A battle of this magnitude would level this building. A waste of good architecture. He glanced at the ceiling. The roof. In 10 minutes. If I win, I get unrestricted access to this entire database, including your private files on the Sky Pillar. Steven's eyes narrowed. The Sky Pillar. He was after Rayquaza, too. Of course he was. It was the logical next step, and if I win? I walk out of this city, out of this region, and I never return, Ash said without hesitation. It was a deal Steven couldn't refuse. A chance to excise this cancer from his home for good. Done, he agreed. He turned and strode out of the room, every line of his body radiating grim purpose. Cynthia remained, her gaze fixed on Ash. Are you sure about this? She asked quietly. His Metagross, it's more than just a Pokémon. It's a living supercomputer. It will analyze your every move. Good, Ash said, walking towards the door. I'm counting on it. The roof of the Devon Corporation building was a flat expanse of white concrete, dotted with ventilation systems and communication arrays. The wind was strong at this height, whipping at the expensive suit Steven wore and the simple jacket Ash had on. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows and bathing the city below in a warm, orange glow. It was a beautiful, peaceful scene, completely at odds with the storm that was about to break. Steven stood at one end of the roof, his back to the setting sun. Ash stood at the other, a silhouette against the darkening eastern sky. Cynthia watched from the doorway leading back into the building, a neutral observer to a conflict that would shape the future. 6 Pokémon. Full battle, Steven declared, his voice cutting through the wind. Skarmory, take flight. He tossed a Pokeball, and a bird of prey made of living steel burst forth, its metallic wings catching the last rays of sunlight. It let out a sharp, piercing cry and soared into the air, circling above them like a vulture. Ash didn't hesitate. Charizard. Burn it out of the sky. The immense, dark-scaled Charizard materialized with a guttural roar, the blue flame on its tail burning with an unnatural intensity. It beat its powerful wings, creating a backdraft that sent dust and debris skittering across the rooftop. It rose to meet the Skarmory, its eyes glowing with a feral intelligence. Steel Wing. Steven commanded. The Skarmory dove, its wings glowing with a white-hot energy, turning it into a metallic missile. Flare Blitz, Ash said, his voice calm. Charizard didn't try to dodge. It met the charge head-on, its entire body erupting in a shroud of brilliant blue fire. The two Pokémon collided in midair with a deafening shriek of grinding metal and a concussive boom that echoed across the city. For a moment, they were a single, struggling entity of fire and steel. Then, the fire won. The blue flames of Ash's Charizard were hotter than any normal fire-type move. They were infused with a raw, chaotic energy that melted steel like wax. The Skarmory's wings buckled, its armor glowing cherry red and beginning to warp. It fell from the sky, trailing black smoke, and crashed onto the roof with a sickening crunch. It was unconscious before it stopped sliding. One move. Steven's face was a mask of stone, but a flicker of shock registered in his eyes. He recalled his Skarmory without a word. Impressive heat. But can it handle this? Aggron, you're next. A bipedal fortress of rock and steel appeared, its roar shaking the very concrete beneath their feet. Return, Ash said, calling back his Charizard. Kingler, your turn. The massive crustacean that appeared was a surprise. It was not a Pokémon known for its use in champion-level battles. But this Kingler was a monster. Its larger claw was the size of a small car, and its shell was scarred and pitted from countless battles. A water type. Predictable, Steven said, a hint of disdain in his voice. Aggron, heavy slam. The Aggron charged, its immense weight making it an unstoppable force. Hone claws, Ash said simply. Kingler braced itself, its massive pincer clicking as it glowed with a faint red aura. It didn't try to move. It simply waited. The Aggron slammed into it, and for a moment, it seemed the smaller Pokémon would be crushed. But Kingler held its ground, its legs digging into the concrete. It was pushed back, but it did not fall. Now, Ash commanded. Crabhammer. With the Aggron still pressing its attack, its body in direct contact, Kingler swung its massive claw. There was no room to build momentum, but it didn't need it. The power was all in the contraction of the muscle. The claw, honed to a razor's edge by the previous move, slammed into the Aggron's side, right below the arm. There was a sound like a pistol shot, followed by the sickening crack of breaking armor. The Aggron roared in pain, stumbling back, a massive crack spider webbing across its steel-plated hide. Again, Ash said, his voice relentless. Kingler advanced, its smaller claw clamping onto the Agron's arm to hold it in place while the larger one rose and fell like a guillotine. Crack. 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 It was brutal. It was savage. It was a systematic demolition. After the fourth strike, the Agron collapsed, its formidable defense shattered. Steven recalled his Pokémon, his face now pale. Two of his strongest defenders, defeated with an efficiency that was terrifying. He looked at Ash, at the cold, calculating expression, and he finally understood. Ash wasn't just a powerful trainer. He was a predator, and this was his hunting ground. You fight without mercy, Steven said, his voice low. Mercy is a liability, Ash replied. He recalled his Kingler, which was breathing heavily but was still ready for more. Your final Pokémon, Steven. Let's end this. Steven took a deep breath, composing himself. This was it. The final stand. There is more to a battle than pure, overwhelming force. There is strategy. There is prediction. And there is a bond that a mind like yours can never comprehend. Metagross, my friend, let us show him. The final Pokeball opened, and the psychic supercomputer floated onto the battlefield. Its metallic body gleamed, its red, cross-shaped eye glowing with immense psychic power. Its four brains were already processing the data from the previous two fights, calculating trajectories, power outputs, and reaction times. It was analyzing Ash himself. Ash, in turn, released his final Pokémon. The ground trembled slightly as the Snorlax appeared. It was enormous, a mountain of flesh and fur, but it did not look lazy or sleepy. Its eyes were open, small and bright and sharp with intelligence. It got to its feet with a surprising quickness, its huge belly seeming to have the density of a collapsed star. A Snorlax, Steven said, a genuine note of disbelief in his voice. Against a Metagross? This battle is already over, Ash said. You just haven't realized it yet. Snorlax, belly drum. Snorlax slapped its stomach with its own hands. A wave of red energy washed over it, and its physical power skyrocketed to its absolute maximum potential. It was a high-risk move, sacrificing half its health for unimaginable strength. Foolish, Steven murmured. You've cut your own Pokemon's life in half. Metagross, its mind is open. Psychic. A wave of shimmering blue energy blasted from Metagross, slamming into the Snorlax. The giant Pokemon grunted, staggering back, but it held its ground. The attack was powerful, but against Snorlax's immense special defense, it wasn't decisive. Now, Meteor Mash, Steven commanded, pressing the advantage. Metagross's claws glowed, and it shot forward like a rocket, tucking its arms in to become a living projectile of steel and psychic energy. Protect, Ash said. A faint green shield flickered into existence around Snorlax an instant before the Metagross hit. The Meteor Mash impacted the shield with a deafening clang, its power completely negated. The Metagross, its momentum spent, was left floating directly in front of the Snorlax, its attack animation just finishing. It was exposed for a fraction of a second. This was the moment Ash had been waiting for. This was the checkmate he had engineered from the very beginning. Metagross's supercomputer brain would have calculated the probability of him using a defensive move, but it would have also calculated the Snorlax's speed. A normal Snorlax would be too slow to capitalize on that tiny opening. But this Snorlax wasn't normal. Giga Impact. There was no wasted movement. Fueled by the power of Belly Drum, Snorlax's body was wreathed in a spiraling aura of golden, destructive energy. It didn't lunge. It simply leaned forward, putting its entire, colossal weight into a single, point-blank blow. The fist, larger than Metagross's entire central body, connected. The sound was not an explosion. It was a dull, final thump, a sound of absolute kinetic energy transfer. The air seemed to warp around the point of impact. Metagross's metallic body dented, caved in, and then it was sent flying. It didn't tumble through the air. It flew straight and true, a silent, silver cannonball, across the entire length of the roof until it slammed into the far wall, leaving a crater in the reinforced concrete. It slid to the ground, its red eye dark, unconscious. Silence. The wind howled over the rooftop, the only sound in the aftermath of the silent, brutal conclusion. Steven stood frozen, his eyes wide, staring at his fallen partner, the Pokémon he had raised from a beldam, the friend who shared his thoughts, defeated. Ash recalled his Snorlax. The battle was won. He had proven his point. He walked past Stephen, who didn't even seem to notice him, and stopped beside Cynthia in the doorway. "You knew," she said, her voice a soft whisper. "You knew he would use Meteor Mash after a failed psychic attack. You baited him." "Metagross is a computer," Ash replied, not looking at her, his gaze fixed on the city lights that were now beginning to sparkle below. "It calculates the most optimal move. A powerful physical attack against a Pokémon that just halved its own health is the logical choice. Logic can be a weapon, or it can be a cage. I just showed him the bars." He turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "You were right. He didn't break. But endurance is just a prolonged form of defeat." He walked past her, back into the archives. On the holographic display, which was still active, he tapped a few commands. The complex energy map was replaced by a stream of data, terabytes of information, flowing from the Devon Corporation's most secure servers onto the encrypted drive he held in his hand. Data on the Sky Pillar. Its history, its structure, its unique energy signature. Everything he needed for the next step. When the transfer was complete, he turned to leave. Stephen was still on the roof. Cynthia was standing in the center of the archive, watching him, her arms crossed. "The path you're on," she said, her voice heavy with a strange mix of condemnation and fascination. "It leads to a very lonely throne, Ash." "All thrones are lonely," Ash replied. "That's the point." He walked out of the archive, leaving her alone in the silence, the data for his next conquest secured in his pocket. Hoenn had been a success. He had the information he needed, and he had sent a clear message to the rest of the world's champions. He was not just a challenger. He was an extinction-level event. And he was coming for their gods. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The weight of the sky. The world ended in a place called Pacific Town. It wasn't a violent, fiery apocalypse, but a quiet, listless one. The town was a collection of wooden rafts and pontoons, lashed together and anchored in the lee of a coral reef, rising and falling with the gentle breath of the ocean. It was a town of drifters, of people who had untethered themselves from the ambitions of the land. They lived on the tide, and by the tide, their lives a simple, repeating cycle. To Ash, it was the most alien place he had ever been. He sat in a small, salt-bleached room in the town's only inn, the data he'd taken from the Devon Corporation scrolling across his datapad. The information was a river, and he was drinking it all in. Structural analyses of the Sky Pillar, ancient meteorological records detailing the perpetual storm that surrounded its location, and, most importantly, eyewitness accounts from the handful of Aura Guardians and Pseudopolitan elders who had been granted permission to make the pilgrimage over the last 1,000 years. They all spoke of it not as a building, but as a test. A place that judged the hearts of those who dared to climb it. Ash scoffed at the notion. A heart was a muscle. It could be trained, conditioned, and controlled like any other. The pillar was a security system, nothing more. A series of locks he had to pick before he could claim the prize at the top. His preparations were complete. His team was rested, their specialized nutritional plans and conditioning regimens strictly followed. He had acquired a decommissioned Team Aqua submersible, paying for it with a sliver of gold from his dwindling supply. He'd retrofitted it himself, stripping its non-essential systems and reinforcing the hull, turning it from a clumsy exploration vehicle into a silent, deep-water infiltrator. He looked out the single, grime-streaked window of his room. The sun was setting, bleeding purple and orange across the horizon. Out there, hidden by leagues of ocean in a vortex of wind and rain, his next objective waited. The legends called it the Master of the Skies, the one who quelled the rage of the land and the sea. Ash called it the key to controlling weather patterns, a strategic asset of unimaginable value, and the third piece, after the lore of Kanto's birds and the raw power of Hoenn's titans, in the puzzle of summoning the architect. He closed the datapad, the cool metal a familiar weight in his hand. The people of Pacific might be content to float, but he was born to climb. The journey was a silent war against the ocean. Ash piloted the submersible through a labyrinth of deep-sea trenches, the pressure outside so immense it made the reinforced hull groan in protest. He ran dark, the vessel's lights off, its engines humming at a frequency designed to mimic the song of a wailord. He navigated by sonar and the stolen Devon charts, a ghost in a world of crushing blackness and bioluminescent monsters. After 10 hours, he reached the perimeter. The water here was different, warmer, and agitated by a powerful, unnatural current. This was the base of the storm. He surfaced in the eye of the vortex, a strangely calm circle of water surrounded by a towering, circular wall of black clouds, lightning, and torrential rain. The sea was choppy, but manageable. In the center of this impossible calm rose the sky pillar. It was a needle of crumbling, pale stone, impossibly tall, jabbing at the bruised underbelly of the clouds. It didn't look like something that had been built. It looked like a fossilized bone from a creature too vast to imagine. He moored the submersible to a rocky outcrop at its base and began his ascent, a single, small figure against a monument of myth. The entrance was a simple, unadorned archway leading into darkness. The air inside was still and cold, heavy with the weight of ages. The first floor was a vast, circular chamber, its walls covered in faded, intricate carvings. They depicted the great clash between Groudon and Kyogre, the devastation, the fear of the ancient people. In the center of the room, the floor was a mosaic of a coiled, green dragon. There was no exit. Ash walked to the center of the room, his footsteps the only sound. He studied the walls, not with awe, but with the analytical gaze of a cryptographer. This was the first lock. The trial of knowledge. The journals he had read called it the Chamber of Beginnings. The path forward was a riddle, hidden in the art. His eyes scanned the carvings. He saw the humans praying to the beasts. He saw them forging the red and blue orbs. He saw the land expanding, the seas rising. But he saw something else, something the common myths always omitted. In a small, easily missed corner of the mural, it showed a third group of humans. They weren't praying. They were turning their backs on the chaos below and climbing, ascending towards a depiction of the sun. He looked at the floor mosaic of Rayquaza. Then he looked up. The ceiling was a dome of plain, unadorned stone, except for a single, small carving directly above the dragon's head, a sun. The answer wasn't in reverence to the gods below. It was in the ambition to rise above them. He walked across the mosaic, his boots tracing the spine of the carved dragon, until he stood where its eye was. He didn't kneel. He didn't pray. He simply stood, a man casting his shadow over a god, and stared up at the carved sun. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a low grinding sound echoed through the chamber. The far wall slid away, revealing a spiral staircase leading up into darkness. He hadn't appeased the Pilar's spirit. He had simply given the correct password. The next floor was a test of a different kind. The air grew thick, heavy, pressing down on him. The trial of endurance. The gravity here was immense. Each step an effort, each breath a struggle. The staircase ended in a long, wide hallway, the ceiling barely 10 feet high. The exit was visible at the far end, 100 yards away. Between him and it, the air shimmered, the gravitational force so strong it was distorting the light. He could have tried to walk it, but it would have exhausted him. Wasted energy was a tactical flaw. He unclipped a Pokeball. Snorlax. Clear a path. The giant Pokemon materialized, its immense bulk seeming to compress even further under the crushing gravity. It grunted, its legs trembling, but it stood its ground. Its body was a mountain of sheer, stubborn mass. Bellydrum, Ash commanded. Snorlax slapped its stomach, the familiar wave of power surging through it. Its muscles, already straining, swelled with new strength. It was a gamble. Pushing a body to its absolute physical limit under these conditions could cause catastrophic injury. But Ash knew his Pokemon's limits better than any biologist. Now, he said. Walk. Snorlax took a step. The floor cracked under its foot. It took another, its breath coming in huge, ragged gasps. It was like watching a continent shift. It wasn't fast, but it was inexorable. It moved through the zone of highest gravity, its sheer mass and power creating a wake, a temporary pocket of slightly less intense force behind it. Ash walked in that wake, the pressure still immense, but bearable. They reached the other side, the floor behind them a spiderweb of cracks. Snorlax collapsed, its chest heaving, its energy spent. Ash recalled it without a word of praise. It had performed its function. He would see to its recovery later. The door to the next level stood open. He expected the next trial to be even more physically demanding. Instead, the chamber he entered was peaceful. It was a perfect replica of Pallet Town. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees. He could see his childhood home, the light on in the window. He could smell his mother's cooking. The trial of spirit. The most insidious of them all. Professor Oak walked out from behind a tree, a warm, kind smile on his face. "Ash, my boy, there you are. We were all so worried. You've been gone for so long." Ash stood perfectly still, his face a mask. This was a psychic illusion, a sophisticated one, designed to prey on nostalgia, on regret, on the buried human desire for a simpler life. His mother, Delia, came out of the house, wiping her hands on an apron. "Ash, honey, dinner's ready, all your favorites." Then came Misty and Brock, laughing, waving him over. And then Gary, his old rival, who clapped him on the shoulder, not with arrogance, but with genuine friendship. "Come on, Ash. Let's have a battle. For old time's sake. No stakes, just for fun." They were all there. Every person he had ever cast aside in his pursuit of power. They offered him everything he had willingly sacrificed. Warmth, companionship, love. The illusion was flawless, pulling at memories he had buried deep. For a single, infinitesimal second, his cold resolve wavered. A flicker of a boy who just wanted to go home. He crushed it. "Gengar," he said, his voice a low growl. "Tear it down." The spectral Pokémon appeared beside him, its malevolent grin fixed on the idyllic scene. It did not see friends or family. It saw a psychic construct, a lie to be devoured. "Shadow Ball," Ash commanded. "Don't aim at them. Aim at the sky." Gengar complied, launching a sphere of pulsing dark energy straight up. When it hit the top of the illusory sky, the entire world cracked like glass. The blue sky shattered, revealing the cold, stone ceiling of the chamber. The trees, the houses, the people, they all dissolved into shimmering, psychic static. The illusion fought back, trying to reform, but the damage was done. The lie was exposed. A wave of pure mental force washed over them, an attack of raw despair and loneliness, the final defense of the psychic trap. It was meant to cripple the mind of the intruder. But Gengar simply floated in the face of it, its grin widening. It opened its mouth and seemed to inhale the psychic assault, feeding on the negative energy as if it were a gourmet meal. When the last of the illusion faded, the chamber was just stone once more. A final staircase stood revealed. Ash recalled his Gengar and ascended without a backward glance at the life he had just destroyed for a second time. The summit was a circular platform open to the sky. He was above the storm now, standing on a tiny island of stone in a sea of churning clouds. The air was thin and bitingly cold. The wind howled, a lonely, ancient sound. He was at the top of the world, a place where the barrier between the planet and the heavens was at its thinnest. He stood in the center of the platform, the stone worn smooth by eons of wind, and he waited. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. There was only the wind and the clouds. A lesser man might have thought he had failed, that the legend was just a story. But Ash was patient. He knew it was here. He could feel it. A static charge in the air, a pressure in his skull. The world was holding its breath. Then, the clouds above him began to glow. A brilliant, emerald green light. The clouds parted, not slowly, but explosively, as if torn asunder by an incredible force. And from the ozone layer, from the very edge of space, it descended. Rayquaza was not a Pokémon. It was a living myth. A serpentine creature of impossible length, its body a tapestry of green and gold, its movements a fluid, terrifying dance. It was larger, far larger, than any of the texts had described. It descended in a controlled fall, its roar a sound that was felt in the bones, a vibration that shook the very foundations of the pillar. It coiled in the air above Ash, its massive head lowering to regard him, its yellow eyes burning with a cold, ancient intelligence. It did not look angry, it looked offended. It was the god of this domain, and a mortal was standing uninvited in its throne room. Ash felt a tremor of something he had not felt since he was a child trapped in a storm. It was not fear. It was awe. An exhilarating, terrifying awe at the scale of the power before him. This was what he had been seeking. The real thing. The awe passed, replaced by the cold, familiar calculus of battle. Rayquaza struck first. It didn't need a command. It opened its mouth and a hyperbeam, thicker than Ash was tall, erupted from its maw. It was not the orange beam of a dragonite. It was pure, white-hot energy, the wrath of the sky itself. "Pikachu!" Ash yelled, rolling to the side as he threw the Pokeball. The Pikachu appeared, and without a moment's hesitation, Ash gave the command. Volt tackle, full power, intercept. Pikachu became a bolt of black-tinged lightning, rocketing towards the beam. The two attacks met. The explosion was blinding, a flash of white and yellow that turned the sky to milk. The shockwave tore across the platform, and Ash braced himself against it, his jacket threatening to rip from his body. When his vision cleared, Pikachu was lying in a heap, its body smoking, knocked out in a single blow. But it had done its job. It had neutralized the initial attack. Sacrifice number 1. Rayquaza roared, enraged that its attack had been stopped. It dove, its body a green blur. The move was Dragon Ascent, a physical blow backed by the power of a meteor. Gengar. Phantom Force, Ash commanded, recalling Pikachu and throwing his next ball in a single, fluid motion. Gengar materialized and dissolved into shadow an instant before Rayquaza would have hit. The legendary dragon slammed into the stone platform, its impact shattering a third of the floor and sending debris plummeting into the clouds below. Gengar reappeared behind it, launching a shadow ball that exploded against Rayquaza's back. The attack was powerful, but it barely seemed to faze the great dragon. It was like throwing a rock at a battleship. Rayquaza whipped its tail around, a move faster than anything that large should be capable of. It caught Gengar in midair, and the ghost Pokémon was sent flying, crashing into the far edge of the platform. It was recalled before it fainted, but it was out of the fight. Sacrifice number 2. Two of his strongest Pokémon, taken out in under 30 seconds. Ash's mind was racing, processing the data. Raw power was useless. Subterfuge was ineffective. Rayquaza was too fast, too strong, too durable. He couldn't fight it, he had to trap it. Lapras. The storm is yours, he yelled, throwing his third Pokeball. The majestic sea Pokémon appeared, looking strangely out of place on the high stone platform. It let out a mournful, beautiful cry that was immediately swallowed by the wind. Rain Dance. Then follow with Blizzard. Lapras sang, and the sky answered. The clouds below, the ones that formed the storm around the pillar, seemed to surge upwards. A cold, torrential rain began to fall, soaking the platform and the great dragon. Rayquaza roared in annoyance, turning its attention to the new threat. But the rain was just the beginning. Lapras sang again, and the temperature plummeted. The rain turned to sleet, then to hail, then to a blinding, swirling blizzard. The wind, already strong, became a gale of ice and snow. Rayquaza, a creature of the high atmosphere, was not used to this kind of ground-level, moisture-heavy cold. Its movements became a fraction slower, its scales frosting over. It's working, Ash thought, a thrill of victory coursing through him. He was controlling the battlefield. Rayquaza had enough. It ignored the blizzard and unleashed another attack. Draco Meteor. A series of fiery rocks rained down from the sky, aimed not at Lapras, but at the entire platform. Lapras was too slow to dodge. One of the meteors struck it a glancing blow, and it cried out in pain, its blizzard faltering. But the trap was already sprung. Now, Charizard, Ash roared, recalling the injured Lapras. Thunder Punch, on the ice. His dark Charizard appeared, its blue flame hissing in the freezing rain. One of its fists crackled with electricity. Rayquaza had coated parts of the platform in a thin layer of ice with its own cold breath from the upper atmosphere. Charizard didn't fly towards the dragon. It slammed its electrified fist into the slick, wet, frozen stone at its own feet. The electricity, conducted perfectly by the water and ice, shot across the entire platform in a massive, instantaneous web of lightning. Rayquaza, its massive body grounded, convulsed as thousands of volts surged through it. It roared, a sound of fury and pain, its body paralyzed for a precious second. This was the opening, the one he had sacrificed 3 Pokémon to create. Kingler. Guillotine. The massive crab Pokémon appeared directly in front of the paralyzed dragon. Its oversized claw, glowing with a faint, dark energy, rose high. It wasn't aiming for the head or the neck. It was aiming for the delicate, feathered fins that ran along Rayquaza's body, the very fins that allowed it to control its flight in the atmosphere. The claw came down. There was a sickening, wet crunch. Rayquaza shrieked, a sound of pure agony, as its primary left fin was severed, the appendage falling to the stone with a wet slap. The paralysis broke. The dragon turned on Kingler, its eyes burning with godlike fury, but it was too late. Its flight was compromised. It was wounded. It was angry. And an angry opponent makes mistakes. It charged, jaws open, but its movement was clumsy, unbalanced. Ash was ready. Snorlax. Your final act. Giga Impact. His final Pokémon, the powerhouse he had been saving, appeared. Powered by the last of its reserves, it met Rayquaza's charge with its own. The collision was apocalyptic. Stone cracked, the air boomed, and for a moment, the two titans were locked in a struggle of pure, irresistible force against an immovable object. Snorlax was pushed back, its feet grinding trenches into the stone. But it held. It held just long enough for the force of its own attack to transfer fully into the wounded, enraged dragon. Rayquaza was thrown backward, its massive body crashing into the very center of the platform, stunned and critically weakened. Now, Ash didn't pull out a standard Pokeball. He pulled a heavy, black sphere from his belt, its surface covered in strange, glowing yellow circuits. A prototype. Something he had designed himself and had commissioned the Sylph Company to build through a dozen shell corporations. A variable capture raid ball, powered by a core of unstable, distilled electrical energy. A storm in a bottle. He poured the last of his own energy, his own will, into the throw. "It's over," he yelled, his voice raw. "You're mine." The ball flew true, striking Rayquaza square on the forehead. It opened, bathing the dragon in a torrent of golden light, and pulled the myth inside. The ball slammed shut and fell to the stone, shuddering violently. It shook once. Twice. A third time. The light on its center button flashed a furious, desperate red. Ash watched, his heart hammering in his chest, his breath held tight. The entire world seemed to fall silent. Click. The light went out. The ball fell still. The blizzard died instantly. The rain stopped. The clouds below began to part, the perpetual storm that had guarded this place for millennia simply vanishing. The sun broke through, bathing the ruined summit in a sudden, brilliant light. Ash stumbled forward, his legs shaking with exhaustion, and picked up the ball. It was heavy. Heavy with the weight of a god. He had done it. His datapad chimed, a harsh, electronic sound in the sudden peace. He pulled it out. A single red dot was blinking on his world map, moving rapidly towards his position from the northeast. It was a transponder signal he himself had piggybacked onto the Ether Foundation's private network. It was their flagship, the Sanctuary. They knew. His capture of Rayquaza had set off every alarm they had. They were no longer investigating, they were hunting. Ash looked at the black ball in his hand, then at the blinking red dot on the screen. He felt the cold smile return to his face. Let them come. He now commanded the sky itself. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The mind of the Lake Sinnoh was a land of cold air and colder myths. The region felt ancient, its mountains like the teeth of a sleeping giant, its vast forests whispering stories older than humanity. When Ash's Charizard finally touched down in a hidden clearing on the outskirts of Eterna Forest, the chill in the air was a welcome knife, sharpening his senses after the humid chaos of Hoenn. The battle for Rayquaza had cost him. He spent a full week in a secluded cave, the blue flame of his Charizard the only light, meticulously tending to his team. Pikachu's electrical sacs had been dangerously depleted, requiring a slow, regulated charge from a customized generator. Gengar's ectoplasmic form was unstable, flickering in and out of phase. His other Pokémon were battered, exhausted, pushed to the very brink of their immense capabilities. He was not a gentle healer. His methods were efficient, detached, a series of calculated applications of potions, energy restoratives, and focused aura therapy techniques he'd learned from a disgraced monk in the mountains of Johto. There were no comforting words, no gentle strokes. There was only assessment, treatment, and the silent expectation of a swift return to operational readiness. They were tools, and a good craftsman maintained his tools. Love was a variable he had eliminated from the equation long ago. It was inefficient. Now, in Sinnoh, he was hunting for concepts. The data he had compiled was clear. To summon the architect, he first needed the instruments of its creation, the masters of time and space. But Dialga and Palkia were not in this dimension. They resided in their own pocket realities, their presence only briefly touching the world at a single, sacred point. The spear pillar atop Mount Coronet. And the gateway, according to the oldest texts, could only be opened by one who held the allegiance of the three spirits that bound the world together: knowledge, emotion, and willpower. Uxie, Mesprit, and Azulf. The Lake Guardians. He began with the one he believed would be the easiest. Emotion. Mesprit, the being of emotion, who slumbered in the depths of Lake Verity. He stood on the shore of the lake as twilight began to bleed across the sky. The water was a perfect mirror, reflecting the deep blues and purples of the heavens. It was a place of profound peace. Ash felt the tranquility as an alien pressure, a force to be shielded against, not embraced. He saw emotion as a weakness, a biological impulse that clouded judgment and created vulnerabilities. He had spent years mastering his own, sealing them behind a wall of cold, hard logic. How could a creature that embodied such a flaw possibly be a threat? He had prepared a team specifically for this encounter. A Weavile, bred for speed and its innate dark-type advantage. A Houndoom, its dark fire a perfect weapon against a psychic mind. And his Gengar, now fully recovered, a phantom to fight a spirit. He approached the encounter with the same clinical detachment as any other battle. He had analyzed the opponent's type, predicted its likely abilities, and prepared his counters. It was just another problem to be solved. He did not use a boat. He simply walked to the edge of the shore and sent out his Lapras. It carried him silently across the placid water, its long neck held low, a gray shadow moving across a purple mirror. In the center of the lake was a small island with a single, dark cave. The air grew heavy as he approached, not with moisture, but with a palpable, psychic energy. It felt like walking into a dream. He stepped off Lapras's back and into the mouth of the cave. Inside, the energy was stronger, a gentle, humming vibration that seemed to resonate with the rhythm of his own heartbeat. The cave opened into a small grotto, and there, floating in the center of a pool of impossibly clear water, was Mesprit. It was small, ethereal, its pink, fairy-like body glowing with a soft internal light. Its two tails, each tipped with a red gem, drifted lazily in the air. It looked at him, its closed eyes conveying a sense of profound, ancient sadness. It did not seem like a guardian or a warrior. It looked like a lost child. A wave of emotion washed over Ash, so sudden and so powerful it made him stagger. It was not his own. It was a feeling of immense, heartbreaking loneliness, the sorrow of a being that had felt the collective pain of the world for 10,000 years. He gritted his teeth, forcing the feeling down. A psychic probe. Predictable. Gengar, he said, his voice tight. Taunt. Then Shadow Claw. Gengar materialized, its grin a slash of darkness in the softly lit grotto. It let out a cackle that was swallowed by the psychic pressure, then shot forward, its claws glowing with spectral energy. Mesprit's eyes did not open. It did not move to dodge. Just as Gengar's claws were about to strike, the red gem on Mesprit's forehead pulsed with a soft pink light. And the world broke. It was not an attack, it was an invitation. Ash was no longer in the grotto. He was in the dark, churning belly of a storm. The taste of salt and fear was on his lips. He was small, so small, his hands barely able to grip the freezing metal rail of a sinking ferry. The deck was tilted at a horrifying angle, and the waves were black mountains moving in the night, their peaks crowned with angry white foam. Rain and sea spray lashed his face, blinding him. He was 10 years old. Ash. Hold on. His mother's voice. He turned, and she was there, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes wide with terror. She was holding onto a broken piece of railing, her other hand reaching for him. He remembered this. He remembered the grinding screech of metal, the screams of the other passengers, the horrifying, final groan of the ship as its spine broke. This was the night he learned that the world had no heroes. The illusion was perfect, a one-to-one recreation pulled from the deepest, most scarred corners of his memory. He felt the cold seeping into his bones, the helpless terror that had defined his life. He saw the wave, the rogue wave, the one that had risen from the blackness like a fist. It towered over them, a liquid wall that blotted out the lightning-streaked sky. "It's okay, honey," Delia Ketchum choked out, her voice barely audible over the roar of the ocean. "Whatever happens, I love you." He reached for her, his small hand outstretched. But the wave hit. The world became a chaos of black water and crushing pressure. He was torn from the rail, tumbling in the icy darkness. He couldn't breathe. His lungs were on fire. He was drowning. And in that moment of absolute desperation, he had prayed. He had screamed in his mind, a frantic, desperate plea to any power that might be listening. To Lugia, the guardian of the sea. To Kyogre, its master. To Arceus, the creator of it all. Please, he begged. Anyone. Save her. Save us. The only answer was the crushing, indifferent silence of the sea. In the heart of this memory, a new figure appeared. It floated before him in the black water, a humanoid shape made of pink, shimmering light. It was Mesprit, but its form was clearer now, its closed eyes somehow looking straight into his soul. It did not speak in words, but in feelings, a question that bloomed directly in his consciousness. Less than what do you feel? Greater than the answer was immediate, overwhelming. Terror. Helplessness. A soul-crushing weakness in the face of a universe that did not care. It was the feeling of being an insect, waiting for the boot to fall. It was the emotion he had spent the last 8 years burying, suffocating, pretending did not exist. He felt his resolve, the cold wall he had built around his heart, begin to crack. The sorrow of that moment, the absolute despair, threatened to drown him all over again. Less than this is what you are, greater than the presence seemed to whisper. Less than beneath the power, beneath the ambition. A scared child, alone in the dark, greater than. He saw his mother's face, her eyes closing as she was pulled away from him into the depths. He was losing her again. He felt the scream building in his throat, the sob of a helpless boy. And then, something else rose with it. Hotter than the sob, colder than the sea. It was rage. A pure, perfect, diamond-hard rage. Rage at the storm. Rage at the sea. But most of all, a blasphemous, world-shaking rage at the silent gods who had heard his prayer and done nothing. His psychic scream was not one of fear. It was a curse. If you will not answer my prayers, the 10-year-old boy vowed, his mind a focal point of absolute, undiluted hatred, then I will become a power you cannot ignore. I will climb to your heavens and pull you from your thrones. I will make you answer for your silence. The force of his will, forged in that moment of trauma and rage, was a psychic shockwave. The illusion of the sea didn't just break. It detonated. The image of Mesprit recoiled as if struck a physical blow. The black water evaporated into screaming white light, and Ash was suddenly back on his knees in the grotto, gasping for air, his knuckles white where he was gripping the damp stone floor. His Gengar was lying unconscious a few feet away. In the center of the pool, Mesprit was gone. He had failed. He hadn't landed a single attack. He hadn't even thrown a Pokeball. He had been met, judged, and dismissed. The psychic assault had bypassed his Pokemon, his strategies, his power, and struck directly at him. It had peeled back his armor and laid his soul bare, and it had found him wanting. He pushed himself to his feet, his body trembling with a mixture of rage and adrenaline. He hadn't been defeated. He had been violated. He felt a profound sense of shame, not for the memory, but for the weakness the creature had exposed. You made a mistake, he whispered to the empty grotto, his voice a ragged hiss. You shouldn't have looked inside. Now you know I'm coming. Now you know why. He stumbled out of the cave, back into the twilight. The world felt fragile, unreal. As he stepped onto the shore, a calm, melodic voice cut through the evening air. It seems you've met the heart of the lake. Cynthia was standing by the tree line, her Garchomp a motionless, menacing statue beside her. She wasn't dressed for battle. She wore a simple black coat and pants, looking more like a scholar who had come to observe a natural phenomenon. Her gray eyes were fixed on him, and they held not judgment, but a deep, unnerving understanding. How long have you been watching? Ash growled, the raw anger from his memory still coiling in his gut. Long enough, she replied softly. I knew you would come here. It was the logical first step. I also knew this would be the result. She took a step forward, her expression serious. The legends of Sinnoh are not like the titans of Hoenn. They are not forces of nature to be tamed. They're ideas, Ash. Mesprit is not a creature that feels emotion. It is emotion. You cannot capture a concept in a Pokeball. Everything can be captured, Ash shot back, his voice colder now as he regained his composure. You just need the right kind of chain. And what chain could possibly hold an idea? Cynthia countered, her question a genuine intellectual challenge. Tell me, what did you feel in there? Ash's eyes narrowed. I felt a weakness, and I crushed it. A flicker of something, disappointment, sadness, crossed Cynthia's face. No, she said. You didn't crush it, you were consumed by it. You are still consumed by it. That rage, it's a fire that will burn you down to the bone if you let it. She paused, her gaze softening slightly. I study the myths, Ash. All of them. There is a passage, from an old Celestic text, about the creation of the spirit trio. It says, that which is born of knowledge must be enlightened. That which is born of will must be focused. But that which is born of emotion cannot be chained, it can only be understood. She was giving him the answer. A clue, he didn't know if it was a warning or a test. What do you want, Cynthia? He asked, his tone sharp. I want to understand you, she said simply, and I want you to understand that what you are trying to do will unravel the very fabric of our world. The Ether Foundation is already here. Their flagship, the Sanctuary, is moving into position off the coast of Snowpoint City. They detected the energy release from your little session with Mesprit. They think one of the Lake Guardians has gone rogue. They will send their hunters. They don't care about balance. They see these beings as threats to be neutralized. Is that the world you want? One where the myths are not just conquered, but erased? Her words hit him harder than any Pokemon attack. The Ether Foundation. His persistent shadow. If they got to Yuxi and Azelf first, if they killed them, his entire plan would be ruined. He needed the trio alive. He needed them to open the way. He stared at her, this brilliant, complicated woman who was simultaneously his greatest intellectual rival and the only person who seemed to see the shape of the abyss inside him. She was playing a dangerous game, trying to steer him, to guide him, when he refused to be led by anyone. Thank you for the information, he said, the words feeling like stones in his mouth. He turned his back on her and walked towards the dark silhouette of the forest. Ash, she called after him. He stopped but didn't turn. You cannot win this fight by becoming stronger, she said, her voice carrying on the cold night air. You can only win by becoming more. Think about that, before you challenge the mind of the lake next. He didn't reply. He melted into the shadows of the trees, his mind already racing. She was right. He had underestimated the nature of the enemy. Brute force had failed. Tactical superiority had failed. He had tried to use a hammer on a lock that required a key. This was not a setback. It was a data point. His strategy had to evolve. If he couldn't chain emotion, then he would need a power that could command it. If he couldn't overpower knowledge, he would need a power that could rewrite it. If he couldn't break willpower, he would need a power that could stop it completely. He needed a power that transcended the mind itself. He needed to control the fundamental laws of existence. He needed to go to the spear pillar. And he needed to be ready for the war that would be waiting for him when he got there. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Spear Pillar's Shadow. The cold was a physical presence inside Mount Coronet. It was an ancient, predatory cold that seeped through clothing and settled deep in the bone. A cold that had nothing to do with altitude and everything to do with time. Ash sat cross-legged on the floor of a narrow, windswept cavern, the only light and heat coming from the steady, controlled blue flame on his Charizard's tail. His eyes were closed, but he was not resting, he was processing. The humiliation at Lake Verity had been a necessary fire. It had burned away the last vestiges of his old methodology, the belief that any problem could be solved with overwhelming force or superior tactics. Mesprit had taught him a painful, valuable lesson. You cannot punch a soul. The Guardians were not Pokemon in the conventional sense. They were conceptual entities, and his approach had been as crude as trying to catch the wind in a net. Cynthia's words echoed in his mind. You cannot win by becoming stronger. You can only win by becoming more. She had meant it as a plea for introspection, for him to find some buried piece of his humanity. He interpreted it as a tactical directive. If he couldn't capture the keys, he would have to force the lock. His new plan was an act of supreme arrogance, a gamble of such monumental scale that it made his previous exploits feel like childish games. He would not hunt the other two Guardians. He would make them, and everyone else, come to him. He would go directly to the Spear Pillar, the holiest place in Sinnoh, a place where the veil between worlds was already stretched thin. There, he would use the raw power of his assembled team, including the Master of the Sky he now held in a black, silent ball on his belt, not to open the gateway, but to threaten to tear it apart. He would create a crisis of such magnitude that every power player in the region would be forced to respond. It was the ultimate lure. He opened his eyes, the cold calculation back in place. He had spent 2 days in this cavern, not just resting his team, but retuning them. He wasn't drilling them on new attacks. He was refining their synergy, their timing, their ability to operate in perfect, lethal concert. He ran complex battle simulations in his mind, choreographing a ballet of destruction. Every member of his team had a specific role to play in the chaos he was about to orchestrate. With a final, deep breath of the freezing air, he rose. It was time. He recalled Charizard, and the cavern was plunged into absolute darkness and a cold that was now sharp enough to cut. He did not flinch. He walked out onto the narrow ledge, into the biting wind of the mountain's upper slopes, his eyes already adjusted to the pre-dawn gloom. The long climb to the summit had begun. The ascent was a vertical battleground. Mount Coronet was not a passive obstacle, it was an active, hostile environment. Razor-sharp winds threatened to peel him from the rock face. Sudden, violent blizzards materialized from clear air, trying to bury him in snow and ice. The mountain was a fortress, and it did not welcome intruders. He moved with a relentless, efficient pace, his Pokémon his tools for conquest. Where a sheer cliff of ice blocked the path, Charizard's dragon breath melted a precise series of handholds into the frozen wall. When a rockslide cascaded down from above, a point-blank Giga impact from Snorlax pulverized the boulders into dust before they could reach him. He navigated treacherous, crumbling ledges on the back of his Kingler, its powerful legs finding purchase where no human could. He was not just a trainer climbing a mountain, he was a one-man army, conquering it. He moved through the eternal twilight of the mountain's shadow, a lone figure of absolute purpose. He did not stop to rest or eat. He consumed high-energy nutrient bars as he walked, his focus absolute, his gaze always fixed upward, towards the unseen summit. After a day and a half of ceaseless climbing, he broke through the cloud layer. The air here was thin, the sun a white, merciless disk in a dark indigo sky. And there, carved into the very peak of the mountain, was the spear pillar. It was a ruin, a shattered temple of colossal white stones that framed the sky. It felt like the roof of the world, a place of immense, terrible power. The air hummed, vibrated, resonated with an energy that made the teeth ache. But he was not the first to arrive. She stood at the entrance to the ruins, her back to him, her long blonde hair and black coat stark against the white snow. Cynthia. And she was not alone. Flanking her were 4 other figures, each radiating an aura of incredible power. Aaron, with his distinctive green hair and confident smirk. Bertha, a tiny, ancient woman who seemed as weathered and solid as the mountain itself. Flint, his fiery red hair a beacon of aggressive energy. And Lucian, tall and poised, his expression one of calm, intellectual disdain. The Sinnoh Elite Four, the mountain's final guardians. "We knew you'd come here," Cynthia said, turning to face him. Her voice was steady, but her gray eyes were filled with a profound, sorrowful gravity. "This is as far as you go, Ash. This is not a challenge. It is not a battle for a title. This is a line you will not cross." "A line drawn by who?" Ash countered, his voice raw from the thin air. He stopped 20 yards from them, the wind whipping his jacket. "By you? By them? By the gods who hide behind these broken stones? I don't recognize your authority." "The authority is the preservation of this world," Lucian interjected, his voice sharp and precise. "Your actions in Hoenn destabilized the entire region's climate for weeks. Your mere presence here is a threat to the fabric of reality. You will be stopped, judged, and contained." "Brave words," Ash said, a cold smile touching his lips. "Let's see if your actions can match them." He didn't wait for a formal declaration. He unclipped 2 Pokeballs. "Gengar, Pikachu. Let's begin the overture." The battle erupted. It was not a series of duels. It was a maelstrom. Lucian and Bertha moved first. Lucian's Bronzong materialized, its chime-like cry echoing strangely in the thin air as it immediately set up a shimmering light screen. Bertha's massive Hippowdon slammed into the ground, its roar conjuring a furious, swirling sandstorm that instantly engulfed the entire summit, reducing visibility to near zero. It was a classic defensive opening, but Ash had planned for it. "Gengar, inside the storm," Ash commanded. "Pikachu, on me." Gengar dissolved into the sand, a purple phantom in a sea of brown. Pikachu stayed close to Ash, a tiny beacon of yellow, its senses sharp. "Drapion. Pin him down," Aaron yelled, sending out his venomous scorpion-like Pokémon. It scuttled into the sand, its tail held high, searching for a target. "Infernape. Flare Blitz. Burn away the sand," Flint roared, his ace Pokémon bursting onto the scene, a whirlwind of fire and fighting spirit. Infernape charged into the storm, its body wreathed in flames, creating a temporary, swirling vortex of fire and sand. In that brief, illuminated chaos, Gengar struck. It didn't attack the Infernape. It phased through the ground and emerged directly beneath Lucian's Bronzong. A full-power Shadow Ball, fired from point-blank range, slammed into the Psychic Bell Pokémon. The light screen flickered, but held. Lucian hadn't anticipated an attack from below. At the same time, Pikachu moved. "Quick attack, on the Drapions' legs," Ash ordered. Pikachu became a yellow blur, weaving through the sand. It wasn't trying to do damage, it was a distraction. It zipped past Drapion, delivering a series of tiny, sharp blows to its leg joints, forcing the larger Pokémon to turn, to chase, to lose its focus. The battle became a complex, three-dimensional war of feints and ambushes. Ash was outnumbered 5-1, but he was controlling the flow of the battle, using their own sandstorm as his primary weapon. His Pokémon were phantoms, striking and fading before the Elite Four could mount a coordinated response. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to create chaos. "Enough of this!" Bertha's voice boomed, cutting through the howl of the sand. "Earthquake! Everyone, brace!" Hippowdon stomped its foot, and the entire summit of Mount Coronet shook. A wave of seismic energy ripped through the ground. But Ash was ready. As the ground began to tremble, he had recalled both Gengar and Pikachu an instant before the attack. The earthquake hit nothing but Bertha's and Aaron's own grounded Pokémon, forcing them to endure the friendly fire. "Now, Charizard! Lapras!" Ash roared, throwing his next two Pokéballs into the air as the tremors subsided. His immense, dark Charizard appeared, its roar a challenge to the heavens. Beside it, his Lapras materialized, its cry a mournful song that seemed to calm the raging sandstorm. "Blizzard!" Ash commanded. Lapras unleashed a torrent of absolute zero wind. The sand, already cold from the altitude, began to freeze. The storm of sand became a storm of jagged, sharp ice crystals, turning the entire battlefield into a hazardous whirlwind of lacerating shrapnel. Flint's Infernape shrieked as the ice storm sapped its fiery aura. "Charizard, flamethrower! Not at them! Create a wall!" Charizard spewed a jet of blue fire, not as an attack, but as a barrier. The fire met the ice storm, creating a massive, billowing wall of steam and fog, further confusing the battlefield, separating Flint and Aaron from Bertha and Lucian. Ash was dissecting them, isolating them, turning their teamwork against them. It was Cynthia who finally broke the stalemate. "This has gone on long enough," she said, her voice cutting through the fog with absolute authority. She strode forward, her expression now one of grim, heartbreaking resolve. "Garchomp, it's time." The land shark dragon emerged with a roar that was pure, apex predator fury. The ground shook with its arrival. Even Ash's Charizard seemed to tense at the sight of it. "Draco Meteor," Cynthia said, her voice barely a whisper. Garchomp tilted its head back and unleashed a volley of cosmic energy into the sky. A moment later, fiery meteors began to rain down, their light tearing through the fog and the last of the ice storm. It was an attack of such overwhelming power that it cleared the entire battlefield. Ash was forced to recall all his Pokémon to protect them from the indiscriminate destruction. When the last meteor hit, the summit was a cratered, smoking ruin. The Elite Four's Pokémon were battered, some of them unconscious. But Cynthia's Garchomp stood in the center of the devastation, virtually unscathed, its gaze locked on Ash. The fog was gone. The board was clear, and now, he faced the Queen. "It's over, Ash," Cynthia said, her voice filled with regret. "Surrender." Ash looked at her magnificent Pokémon, at the exhausted but still standing members of the Elite Four. He looked at the shattered stones of the spear pillar. He had pushed them. He had created the chaos he needed. A grim smile spread across his face. "You're right," he said, "it is over, you've lost." He held up the Black Master Ball. "You thought I came here to fight you. You are merely the catalyst." He hurled the ball into the air. "Rayquaza, shatter the sky." The ball burst open, and the god of the sky erupted into being. Rayquaza's form, immense and terrifying, coiled in the thin air above the pillar, its roar a physical force that knocked the Elite Four back a step. The sky, already a dark indigo, seemed to darken further at its presence. The combined energy on the summit, the residue from the massive battle, the latent power of the spear pillar itself, and now the raw, cosmic aura of a legendary Pokémon from another region, was too much. The world began to scream. The air shimmered, not with heat, but like a reflection in a disturbed pool of water. A high-pitched, whining sound filled the air, the sound of reality being stretched past its breaking point. Above the central point of the spear pillar, a single, black line appeared in the sky. It grew, spider webbing outwards, cracking the very fabric of space. "What have you done?" Cynthia breathed, her eyes wide with horror, staring at the growing wound in the sky. With a sound like tearing silk and breaking glass, the rift tore open. It was not a portal of light. It was a hole of absolute nothingness, a jagged tear that led to a place where color, light, and logic had no meaning. A tide of shadow, a wave of palpable anti-energy, poured out, draining the warmth from the air, the sound from the world. And from the silent, black wound, it emerged. Its 6 powerful legs unfolded, its gray, segmented body absorbing the very light around it. Golden, rib-like structures adorned its sides, and 2 vast, shadowy wings, more like appendages of pure antimatter than physical limbs, spread out behind it. Its red eyes, ancient and emotionless, surveyed the scene below. Giratina. The renegade. The lord of the distortion world. It did not roar. Its presence was a suffocating pressure, a silence that was louder than any sound. It ignored Rayquaza, who hissed at the unnatural presence. It ignored Cynthia and her Garchomp. It ignored the battered Elite Four. Its unknowable gaze fixed on the single, insignificant human who had caused this glorious, beautiful rupture. It focused on Ash. A voice entered Ash's mind. It was not made of words, but of images, feelings, and a cold, ancient hunger. It showed him galaxies being born and dying. It showed him Arceus forging the laws of reality, and it showed him the shadows where those laws did not apply. It showed him rebellion. It showed him a universe of infinite, chaotic possibility, free from the tyranny of order. Less than you are like me, greater than the presence conveyed. Less than you would tear down the pillars of heaven. You seek to dethrone the Creator. Kneel. Become my shadow in this world, and I will grant you the power to unmake it all. Greater than. It was the ultimate temptation. A direct offer from a god of chaos to become its avatar. Power beyond his wildest dreams, handed to him. All he had to do was bend the knee. To trade one master for another. Ash looked up at the terrifying, magnificent creature. He looked at the offer of absolute destructive power. He thought of the sinking ship, the silent sky, the vow he had made in the cold, dark water. His voice, when he spoke, was clear and steady in the unnatural silence. I kneel for no one. He met Giratina's gaze, his own eyes burning with the cold fire of his singular, unbreakable ambition. You are a god. I am a man, and I have come to take your place, not to serve in your shadow. If you want this world, you will have to go through me. A profound stillness settled over the summit. Cynthia stared, speechless, at the sheer, insane audacity of the boy. He had not just refused a god, he had challenged it. Giratina's red eyes seemed to narrow. The voice in Ash's mind conveyed a final, single concept. Not anger, not disappointment, it was intrigue. The lord of the distortion world tilted its head, a slow, ancient gesture. Then, without a sound, it receded, pulling its shadowy aura back with it, and vanished into the tear in reality. The rift did not close. It remained, a jagged, permanent scar in the sky above the spear pillar. A black wound leaking the cold silence of another universe into their own. Ash recalled his Rayquaza. The battle was over. He hadn't gotten the gateway he wanted. He had gotten something far more dangerous. He had gotten the attention of the enemy. He stood amidst the ruins, the scar of another world hanging above him, the guardians of Sinnoh watching him with a new, horrified understanding. He had failed in his objective, but he had succeeded in changing the entire nature of the war. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6, An Alliance of Champions. The silence that followed Giratina's departure was a living thing. It was heavier than the thin mountain air, colder than the ice that clung to the shattered stones. The rift remained, a jagged, black wound in the sky, leaking the profound wrongness of another universe into theirs. It did not hum or roar. Its power was in its absolute, terrifying stillness. Cynthia and the Sinnoh Elite Four stood frozen, their gazes fixed not on Ash, but on the scar in the heavens. Their battle, which moments ago had felt like the most important conflict in the world, had been rendered insignificant, a scuffle between children in the shadow of a truly cosmic horror. They had come to stop a rogue trainer. They now stood as witnesses to a broken creation. Ash was the first to move. His body ached, the adrenaline of the battle giving way to a bone-deep exhaustion. He recalled Rayquaza, the black ball absorbing the legendary Pokémon with a quiet, final click. The oppressive aura of the Sky God vanished, but it did little to lessen the tension. He turned, his boots crunching on the frost-covered rubble, and began to walk away. "Where do you think you're going?" Flint's voice was a raw, disbelieving rasp. He took a step forward, his Infernape, battered but still standing, moving with him. "You can't just break the sky and walk away." Ash didn't stop or turn. "Watch me," he said, his voice flat and tired. "We have to stop him," Aaron urged, looking to Cynthia. "We can't let him leave." Cynthia didn't move. Her eyes were still on the rift, her mind grappling with the scale of what had just transpired. She had prepared for a battle against an ambitious human. She had not prepared for a theological crisis. Ash hadn't just summoned a legendary, he had drawn the attention of a fallen god and, in his defiance, had permanently altered the landscape of their reality. To try and stop him now, with their teams exhausted and their spirits shattered, it would be a pointless slaughter. "Let him go," she said, her voice a low, heavy command that surprised even herself. Flint and Aaron stared at her, aghast. "Let him go?" "Cynthia, he is no longer just a trainer," she cut them off, finally tearing her gaze from the sky to look at them. The usual warmth and intellectual confidence in her eyes had been replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "He is a catalyst. A walking apocalypse. Our priority is no longer him. It is that." She gestured with her chin towards the silent, black wound above them. "Containment. Assessment. We need the best minds from Jubilife and Canalive. We need to understand what that rift is doing to our world." Her authority was absolute. The Elite Four, though visibly conflicted, deferred to her judgment. They watched in grim silence as Ash reached the edge of the summit and, without a backward glance, began his descent into the clouds below. A lone figure disappearing back into the world he had just irrevocably broken. The news did not break, it seeped. The Pokémon League, in a desperate attempt to prevent global panic, enforced a total media blackout around Mount Coronet. But you cannot place a gag order on reality. Fishermen off the coast of Sunnyshore reported compasses spinning wildly, their needles pointing not north, but towards the mountain's peak. Pilots flying the international route from Hoenn to Sinnoh encountered bizarre, localized pockets of reversed gravity. In Celestic Town, the ancient murals depicting Dialga and Palkia began to weep a thin, black, oily substance. The world was sick, and the infection was spreading from the wound Ash had torn open. In a secure, subterranean chamber beneath the Indigo Plateau, a place far grander and more technologically advanced than the public battle arenas above, a circle of light formed. One by one, holographic figures flickered into existence, seated around a virtual round table. They were the pillars of the established order, the strongest trainers in the world, the final arbiters of the balance Ash so despised. Lance, champion of Kanto and Johto, appeared first. His expression was thunderous, his hands clasped so tightly the knuckles of his holographic form were white. Stephen Stone of Hoenn materialized beside him, his silver hair seeming to catch the ethereal light, his face a mask of cool, analytical concern. Wallace, Hoenn's other champion-level trainer and a celebrated artist, shimmered into view, his usual flamboyant grace replaced by a palpable anxiety. Alder, the wandering champion of Unova, looked old and weary, the weight of the news pressing down on his broad shoulders. And finally, Diantha, the glamorous star of the Kalos region, her beautiful face etched with a fear that no movie role had ever required of her. "The reports are confirmed," then, Lance began, his voice a low growl that filled the chamber. "A confirmed level 5-dimensional rift has been opened. Giratina has been sighted, and Ash Ketchum is responsible. My sources at Devon confirm the atmospheric distortions are unnatural," Stephen added, his voice smooth but edged with steel. "They do not conform to any known meteorological or geological models. The energy signature is pure antimatter. It's bleeding into our world. Slowly, for now, but it's there." "It's a scar," Wallace murmured, his eyes distant. A hideous, ugly scar on the face of our beautiful world. This cannot be allowed to stand. What I want to know, Alder said, leaning forward, his gaze sweeping across the others, is how a boy from Pallid Town got strong enough to do this. We are not talking about a regional threat anymore. We are talking about a force that can challenge the very gods we are sworn to protect. He is a terrorist, Lance stated, slamming a fist on the virtual table. The image flickered. His ideology is poison. He believes the legendary Pokémon are not guardians, but tyrants, and that he has the right to usurp them. There can be no negotiation with such madness. He must be hunted down and neutralized by any means necessary. A frontal assault would be a mistake, Steven countered calmly, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. I faced him. He does not think like a normal trainer. He anticipates. He calculates. He turns your own strengths into weaknesses. To simply hunt him with overwhelming force is to play his game. He would see it coming a mile away and set a trap for us. So we do nothing? Lance challenged, his voice rising. We allow him to continue this rampage? What's next? Does he try to capture Lugia? Ho-oh? Does he march on the Hall of Origin itself? The room fell silent at the mention of the sacred place. The very idea was blasphemy. There is another factor, Diantha said, her voice drawing their attention. The media. The blackout won't hold. When this story breaks, and it will break, there will be worldwide panic. People will demand action. If we, the champions, are seen to be fumbling, to be arguing amongst ourselves while the sky is literally falling, we will lose all authority. The chaos in the streets could be more damaging than anything Ash himself could accomplish. Their argument was a microcosm of their differing philosophies. The warrior, the scientist, the artist, the sage, and the politician, all faced with a problem that defied their collective experience. Then, a final figure materialized in the last empty chair. Cynthia. Her face was pale, her eyes held the weary look of someone who had not slept, but her presence immediately commanded the room. You are all correct, she said, her voice quiet but firm, and you are all wrong. The other champions turned to her, a mixture of respect and anticipation on their faces. She was the one who had been there. She was their only eyewitness. Lance is right, she continued, her gaze meeting his. Ash is a threat that must be stopped. His ambition is a fire that will consume the world if it is not checked. But Steven is also right. He is not a simple villain. His mind is a labyrinth of strategy and trauma. To hunt him like a wild animal is to corner a creature far more intelligent and dangerous than you can possibly imagine. She took a breath, the memory of the grotto at Lake Verity flashing in her mind. Before he went to the spear pillar, he tried to capture Mesprit. He failed. Mesprit did not fight him with power. It showed him his own heart. I believe the source of his rage, his insatiable hunger for power, is a wound. A trauma so deep it has defined his entire existence. He isn't just seeking to control the gods. He is seeking to punish them for a crime he believes they committed against him. A heavy silence descended upon the chamber. Cynthia's words had reframed the entire conflict. They were not just facing a rogue element, they were facing a crusade. A motive does not absolve him of his crimes, Lance said, though his voice had lost some of its hard edge. No, Cynthia agreed, but it is a key, it helps us understand him. And understanding is a weapon he does not expect us to wield. She looked around the table, her eyes pleading. We cannot afford to be divided. We must act as one. We must pool our resources, our intelligence, our strength. We must form an alliance, not just to hunt him, but to outthink him. We must protect the other legendaries before he can get to them, and we must find a way to close that rift before its effects become irreversible. Her words galvanized them. She had given them a path forward, a unifying purpose that transcended their individual disagreements. An alliance of champions, Steven said, nodding slowly. A joint task force. It is the logical solution. I agree, Diantha said. A united front is our best hope, both for stopping him and for managing the public fallout. One by one, they all consented. The alliance was born, not in a grand ceremony, but in the grim, holographic quiet of a secret chamber, forged from fear and necessity. They officially declared Ash Ketchum an international fugitive, his capture the highest priority for every Pokémon League on the planet. Their networks of gym leaders, Elite Fours, and League-sanctioned Rangers were now a global army, and Ash was their only target. Far away, in the cold, forgotten underbelly of Veilstone City, Ash sat in the darkness of an abandoned warehouse. The only light came from the glowing screen of his datapad, its reflection dancing in his dark, focused eyes. He was not hiding, he was listening. He had hacked into the League's encrypted network months ago, a series of backdoors and phantom protocols that allowed him to monitor their highest levels of communication. He had just watched the entire meeting, every argument, every decision. He had seen the formation of the alliance that now hunted him. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. It was perfect. They had reacted exactly as his psychological profiles had predicted. Lance, the hammer, demanding force. Steven, the strategist, urging caution. Cynthia, the empath, seeking to understand his soul. They were so predictable, so beautifully, fatally predictable. He had wanted them to unite. A dozen scattered enemies were an inconvenience. A single, monolithic entity with a clear command structure and a predictable ideology. That was a target. He now had them all on one board, their pieces finally in play. He could watch their every move, anticipate their every strategy, and feed them the exact information he wanted them to have. He was no longer the hunted. He was the puppet master. His attention was drawn to a new file that appeared on his screen. It was a data packet from an unknown source, routed through a series of anonymous relays so complex it almost defied tracking. But its encryption signature was unique, a complex cipher based on the untranslatable glyphs found only in the ruins of Celestic Town. There was only one person in the world who would use such a code: Cynthia. He decrypted the message. It was not a warning or a threat. It was a single, high-resolution image of a stone tablet. The tablet was covered in ancient text, but one section was circled in red. It was a passage detailing the forging of the Red Chain, the artifact used in antiquity to bind Dialga and Palkia. The text was esoteric, but it spoke of a necessary component: the will of the adamant, the spirit of the pearl, and the heart of the void. The void. Giratina. It was a clue. A breadcrumb. A message sent from the heart of the enemy camp. She wasn't betraying them. Not yet. She was trying to engage him in a dialogue, a battle of wits on a level the others couldn't even comprehend. She was challenging him, testing him, trying to guide him towards an answer other than sheer destruction. He looked at the image for a long time, the cold logic of his mind warring with a flicker of something else. It was the same feeling he'd had in the Devon archives, the startling recognition of an equal. She was the only one who was not playing the game. She was trying to change the rules. Aboard the Ether Foundation's aerial flagship, the Sanctuary, the atmosphere was one of cold, clinical urgency. The vast, sterile white bridge was a hive of activity, technicians in pristine uniforms monitoring dozens of screens displaying atmospheric data, energy readings, and tracking maps. Faba, a man whose ambition was matched only by his lack of scruples, stood before the main view screen, which showed a magnified, horrifying image of the rift above Mount Coronet. "The dimensional bleed is accelerating," a technician reported, her voice devoid of emotion. "Antimatter particle concentration in the upper atmosphere has increased by 12% in the last hour. At this rate, the region's ecosystem will begin to suffer catastrophic cellular decay within the week." "And the target?" Faba asked, his hands clasped behind his back. "Subject Ketchum has gone dark. His energy signature vanished after his descent from Mount Coronet. We believe he is utilizing some form of advanced shielding." "And the champions? They have formed an alliance. Their communications indicate a global manhunt is underway. They're a complication." Faba's lips curled into a sneer. "The champions are relics. They seek to preserve a broken system. They see the legendaries as gods to be appeased. We know them for what they are: biological weapons of mass destruction. The incident at the Spear Pillar has only proven our thesis. Their very existence invites chaos." He turned, his gaze falling upon a massive, cylindrical containment unit at the back of the bridge. Inside, suspended in a shimmering green gel, was a creature of terrifying, unnatural design. It was a chimera, its body a patchwork of different Pokémon types, its head encased in a heavy, power-dampening helmet. Type: Full. The first of a new generation. An anti-deity task force in a single body. "President Lusamine has given her final approval," Faba said, a gleam of fanaticism in his eyes. "Our primary objective is no longer observation. It is sanitation. We will cleanse this world of its mythical instabilities. And we will begin with the source of the current infection. He turned back to the view screen. Find me Ash Ketchum. And prepare the full program for deployment. It's time to take out the trash. Ash closed Cynthia's file. His mind was already working, integrating the new information. The red chain. A key that required the essence of the very beings he sought to control, plus the one he had just antagonized. It was a paradox, a beautiful, elegant puzzle. His path was clear. He couldn't force the gateway open with raw power. He had to build the key. And to do that, he had to return to the lakes. He had to face the Guardians again, but this time, he would not come with force. He would come with the knowledge Cynthia had given him. He would come with a plan to capture not just their bodies, but the very concepts they embodied. He stood up, the darkness of the warehouse clinging to him like a shroud. The world was now united against him. An alliance of champions on one side, a fanatical scientific cult on the other. They were all hunting him. He smiled. The board was set, the pieces were moving, and they were all moving exactly where he wanted them to go. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Distortion World's Bargain. The Canalive Library was a tomb of silent words. Ash stood in the heart of its most forbidden section, a circular chamber known to the librarians as the Vault of Whispers. He hadn't picked the lock or bribed a curator. He had simply walked through the wall, his Gengar holding him in a state of temporary ectoplasmic suspension, a ghost passing through stone. The air was dry, thick with the smell of paper so old it had forgotten the trees it came from. Scrolls bound in dragon hide and books with covers of petrified wood lined the shelves, containing ideas so dangerous the world had decided to bury them. He was not hiding, he was studying. His assault on the spear pillar had been a failure of imagination. He had brought an army to a philosophical debate. Cynthia's clue, the cryptic text about the red chain, had illuminated his error. The will of the adamant, the spirit of the pearl, and the heart of the void. It wasn't a shopping list. It was a recipe for a key that could bind concepts. To forge it, he couldn't simply defeat the Guardians, he had to possess the very essence of what they represented. And the third ingredient, the most crucial and most terrifying, was the power of the renegade god he had just insulted. He needed a piece of Giratina. For 3 days and nights, he devoured the forbidden lore. He absorbed treatises on dimensional physics that made the Devon Corporation's research look like a child's primer. He learned of gravitational constants, of temporal paradoxes, of the theoretical membrane that separates a universe of matter from its antimatter reflection. He learned that the distortion world was not just a place, it was a conscious, living entity, and Giratina was its heart, its will, and its prisoner. And he found what he was looking for. A single, insane theory, postulated by a heretical scholar centuries ago who was excommunicated for his writings. The scholar believed that a dimensional rift was not a door, but a wound. A chaotic, unstable tear. To pass through it, one could not simply open it wider. One had to stabilize it, to give the wound a temporary, focused purpose. And that required an immense, reality-bending expenditure of energy. An anchor. Ash left the library before dawn, the knowledge he'd stolen a cold, hard weight in his mind. He now had the theory. He already possessed the anchor. The journey back to the vicinity of Mount Coronet was a ghost run. He traveled by night on his Charizard, flying at altitudes that would freeze the lungs of a normal human, a black shadow against the cold Sinnoh stars. He moved through the blind spots in the Champion Alliance's patrol routes, a phantom they were searching for in all the wrong places. He found what he needed on the peak of a lesser mountain, a lonely, unnamed spire of rock that offered a clear, unobstructed view of the permanent, ugly scar that still hung in the sky above the spear pillar. The air was thin, the wind a razor. Ash stood on the precipice, the black master ball containing Rayquaza feeling strangely warm in his hand. This was the most dangerous gamble he had ever conceived. He was about to use a god as a surgical laser to perform open-heart surgery on the fabric of reality. Rayquaza, he said, his voice swallowed by the wind as he threw the ball. Your power is required. The sky god materialized, its immense, serpentine form coiling in the air, its presence immediately silencing the wind. It looked down at Ash, its ancient yellow eyes holding not malice, but a weary resignation. It was a being of immense power, and it was bound to the will of the small, determined creature on the rock below. I do not need your strength, Ash said, his voice calm and precise, as if giving instructions to a machine. I need your nature. You are the guardian of the sky, the one who balances the forces of this world. Your energy resonates with the very fabric of our dimension. Focus that energy, Draco Meteor, but do not release it as an attack. Condense it, refine it. I need a single, pure beam, aimed at the heart of the rift. Rayquaza seemed to understand. It was a command that went beyond a simple battle tactic. It was a request that spoke to its fundamental purpose. The great dragon tilted its head back, its mouth open to the dark sky. A point of light appeared, a miniature star of swirling, orange-gold energy. It did not explode outwards. It compressed, growing smaller and smaller, its light becoming so intense it was painful to look at. The air crackled, the very rock of the mountain vibrating as cosmic power was focused into a single, perfect point. With a silent roar, Rayquaza unleashed the beam. It was not a meteor shower. It was a lance of pure dimensional energy, a golden thread that shot across the sky and struck the center of the black rift. For a moment, there was a terrible, high-pitched scream, the sound of tearing reality being forced back into alignment. The jagged, chaotic edges of the rift pulled inward, coalescing around the golden beam. The chaotic wound transformed, its blackness turning into a shimmering, oily surface, like a vertical pool of mercury. It was stable, a gateway. Good, Ash breathed, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. He recalled Rayquaza, its task complete. Charizard, now, his dark-scaled Charizard was already there, its wings beating powerfully. Ash leapt onto its back, a familiar, practiced motion. Together, they charged towards the shimmering, unnatural portal hanging in the sky. The transition was a physical assault. It felt like being pushed through solid glass. There was a moment of absolute, crushing pressure, a cacophony of silent screams, and a sensation of being turned inside out. Then, they were through. They emerged into a world of beautiful madness. They floated in a void of shifting, bruise-colored light. There was no up or down, no ground, no sky. Vast, broken platforms of rock drifted aimlessly, some with waterfalls that flowed upwards into nothing. Forests of crystalline trees grew sideways from floating islands, their leaves shedding motes of purple light. Time felt thick, sluggish one moment, then terrifyingly fast the next. This was the distortion world. Giratina's kingdom, and its prison. Stay focused, Ash commanded, his own senses reeling from the sheer wrongness of the place. Charizard let out a low growl, its wings beating to keep them stable in the non-existent gravity. They navigated the impossible landscape, flying between floating islands and dodging streams of reverse-flowing water. The silence here was as profound and unsettling as the rift itself. It was the silence of a place without life, without consequence, without law. And then the silence was broken. From the violet haze below, a colossal form rose to meet them. Giratina. In its home dimension, it was different. Larger, more real. Its shadow wings seemed to bleed into the very fabric of the void. Its 6 legs moved with a liquid grace, finding purchase on invisible planes of reality. Its red eyes burned with a cold, ancient light, and Ash felt its voice in his head again, clearer this time, laced with a terrifying amusement. Less than the little king has come to my court uninvited. Bold, foolish, you have brought your laws of matter and order into a place where they are meaningless. Greater than. I am not here to fight you by my rules, Ash projected back, focusing his own thoughts into a coherent message. I am here to make a bargain. Less than bargains are for equals, greater than Giratina replied, its massive head tilting. Less than you are a mote of dust. I am the abyss. What could you possibly offer me? Greater than. Your freedom, Ash said, the thought a razor-sharp point. A wave of something ancient and powerful washed over him. It was not an attack. It was the emotion of a god. Surprise. Intrigue. This world is your prison, Ash continued, his confidence growing. Arceus locked you here for your rebellion. You can see my world, touch it, even tear small holes in it. But you cannot truly enter it. You are bound to this place. I can change that. I am gathering the power to summon Arceus itself. To challenge it. To bind it. Help me, and when I have taken its throne, I will shatter the lock on your cage. Giratina was still for a long moment, considering the offer. It was the one thing Ash could offer that the god could not achieve itself. Less than a tempting lie, greater than the voice finally returned. Asterisk less than you would use my power, then cast me aside. You are a creature of order, of control. You would never unleash true chaos upon your precious world. Your ambition is a cage of a different design. Greater than. Without another thought word, it attacked. The platform of rock 100 yards below them suddenly folded in on itself like a piece of paper, a gravitational anomaly designed to crush them. Charizard roared, banking hard to avoid the impossible physics. Snorlax. Ash yelled, throwing the Pokeball. The giant Pokémon materialized, floating in the void. Giga impact. At the creature itself. Snorlax became a comet of golden energy, charging through the void. But as it was about to connect, Giratina simply wasn't there. It had phased out of existence, and Snorlax shot through empty space. The battle was a nightmare of surrealism. Ash's Pokémon, titans in their own world, were clumsy and ineffective here. Giratina changed the rules of engagement with every passing second. Gravity would reverse without warning, sending a flamethrower attack spiraling uselessly into the void. The very space between his Pokémon and Giratina would stretch, making a guaranteed hit from his Kingler fall short by miles. He was trying to play chess on a board that was actively melting and rearranging itself. He had expected this. Brute force was a distraction, a way to occupy the god while he prepared his true gambit. Gengar, he yelled, recalling the others. You're at home here. Find its center. The ghost Pokémon appeared, its grin wide and manic. It was the only one of his team that seemed to revel in the chaotic energy of this place. It dissolved into the purple haze, a shadow in a world of shadows. Giratina ceased its physical attacks. It seemed to realize Ash's true purpose was not combat. It changed its tactics. The voice returned to his mind, no longer amused, but seductive. Asterisk less than why do you cling to such a flawed reality? Look at what your world of order has created. Greater than. Visions flooded Ash's mind, not memories this time, but possibilities. He saw a universe where there was no good or evil, only strength and weakness. He saw himself, not as a champion, but as a shaper of worlds, his will the only law, creating and destroying Pokémon, continents, stars, with a single thought. He saw a reality of pure, exhilarating freedom, where no one would ever be weak or helpless again, because the very concept of weakness had been annihilated. It was the ultimate temptation, an offer not just of power, in his world, but of all power, in every world. The boy in the storm screamed in his soul, yes. Take it, burn it all down. But the man Ash had become, the cold, calculating strategist, saw the lie. It was not freedom, it was oblivion, the end of everything. Control was his goal, not chaos. I am a king, not an anarchist, he projected back, his will a shield against the seductive visions. And I am here for my tribute. He had located it. Gengar had found it. Not a physical heart, but a focal point, a swirling vortex of shadow and anti-energy deep within Giratina's spectral form. It was the nexus of its being, the heart of the void. Now, Gengar, Destiny Bond. It was a modified version of the move, one he had drilled with Gengar for days in the darkness of Mount Coronet. It wasn't designed to link their life forces. Gengar fired a single, thin, black thread of energy that attached to the nexus point. It was a conduit, a siphon. From his belt, Ash threw a specially designed Pokeball. It was empty, its internal mechanism stripped and replaced with a containment field of pure, stabilized electrical energy. The ball hovered in the void, and the other end of Gengar's spectral thread attached to it. For a single, horrifying second, the essence of the distortion world, the raw, undiluted antimatter of Giratina's core, flowed through the conduit and into the ball. The shriek that erupted was not a sound. It was a psychic explosion of pure, divine rage that cracked the floating islands and tore the purple haze asunder. Giratina, the god of chaos, had been violated, a piece of its very soul stolen by a mortal. Less than thief, greater than the voice screamed, no longer a thought, but a weapon that hammered at Ash's mind. Less than you will not leave this place. You will become a part of my eternal silence. Greater than. The entire dimension began to collapse. The floating islands crumbled, the light faded, and the void itself seemed to rush in, a tangible wave of nothingness intent on erasing them. Charizard, go! Ash roared, grabbing the pulsing, now black Pokeball from the air. Charizard dove, its blue flame the only light in the collapsing universe. Gengar, its task complete, was recalled. They flew desperately, the world literally ending behind them. A gateway of shimmering mercury appeared in the distance, their escape route. Shadowy tendrils, the physical manifestation of Giratina's rage, lashed out, trying to ensnare them. One clipped Charizard's wing, and the great dragon roared in pain, its scales seeming to decay where the antimatter touched them. But it did not falter. It pushed on, fueled by loyalty that Ash had never acknowledged but had always commanded. They burst through the portal a second before it snapped shut with a sound like a thunderclap in a vacuum. They tumbled onto the hard, cold reality of snow and rock. The sky above them was clear. The rift was gone. The wound had healed. Ash lay on his back, gasping in the thin, painfully real air. Charizard was collapsed nearby, its breathing ragged, the wound on its wing a dark, ugly patch of gray. He pushed himself up, his body screaming in protest. In his hand, he held the ball. It was no longer a perfect sphere. It seemed to warp the light around it, and it pulsed with a faint, dark beat, like a diseased heart. He had done it. He had the heart of the void. He stood on the lonely mountain peak, the world he had just saved from his own actions, completely unaware of his sacrifice or his crime. He had journeyed into hell, challenged its ruler, and stolen a piece of its soul. He was more alone, more powerful, and more damned than ever before. 2 keys left to forge. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Red Chain. Recovery was a foreign concept to Ash. He saw it only as a necessary delay, a period of forced inactivity between strategic objectives. He sat in the ruins of an old watchtower overlooking the frigid expanse of Lake Acuity, the wind a constant, whining scream. For 5 days, he had done nothing but stare at the black, pulsing sphere in his hands. The Void Heart. It was not a Pokemon, not an item, but a contained paradox, a piece of a universe with different rules. It felt cold, not with a physical absence of heat, but with a conceptual one. It was the cold of a place where warmth had never been invented. The trip to the distortion world had changed him. Not his goal, but his understanding of the forces at play. He had felt the seductive call of chaos and had rejected it, not out of morality, but out of a tyrant's preference for order. He had survived a battle of impossible physics and stolen the soul of a god. He now understood what Cynthia had tried to tell him. You don't fight an idea with a fist. You fight it with a better, sharper idea. His new plan was a scalpel where before he had used a sledgehammer. He would not confront the remaining guardians. He would present them with equations they could not solve. Lake Acuity was the home of Yuxi, the being of knowledge. The ancient texts claimed its eyes held the entirety of the universe's knowledge, and that to look into them would wipe the mind of the viewer clean. A perfect defense. An information-based weapon of mass destruction. How do you defeat an enemy who knows your every possible move before you make it? You make a move that is, by its very nature, unknowable. He descended from the watchtower, his movements slow and deliberate in the biting cold. The entrance to Acuity Cavern was a fissure in a cliff face, a sliver of darkness against the white snow. He entered alone, leaving his team in their Pokeballs. This was not a task for them. The grotto was a place of profound, crystalline silence. Yuxi floated above a perfectly still, ice-rimmed pool, its small, gray body motionless, its yellow, helmet-like head concealing its legendary eyes. As Ash entered, the being of knowledge turned to face him, and a wave of pure information washed over him. It was not an attack, but a statement of fact. It showed him his own genetic code, the precise trajectory of the dust motes dancing in the air, the billion-year history of the rock he was standing on, and the exact probability of his own death in the next 5 minutes. It was a simple, overwhelming declaration. I know everything. You cannot win. Ash did not flinch. He did not shield his mind. He simply raised the pulsing black sphere he held. I believe you are missing a chapter, he projected, his thought a calm, clear intrusion into the psychic silence. He opened the containment field of the Void Heart. It did not release energy or sound. It released an idea. It was the concept of nothing. Not the absence of something, but a true, fundamental, screaming void. The nature of a universe without law, without creation, without a beginning or an end. It was the knowledge of anti-knowledge. Yuxi recoiled. For the first time in its eternal existence, it had been presented with a piece of information that did not fit into the grand, ordered library of its mind. It was a logical paradox, a book with pages that were simultaneously blank and filled with infinite text. Its psychic defenses, built on the premise of omniscience, turned inward. It tried to process the impossible data, to categorize the uncategorizable. A feedback loop began. The being that knew everything was suddenly trapped in an eternal, silent loop of trying to comprehend the one thing that was nothing. Its body began to tremble, a faint, high-frequency vibration. The air shimmered around it. It was a system crash on a cosmic scale. Ash walked forward, his steps sure on the icy ground. He unclipped a specialized Pokeball, a Chronoball, designed to have a higher capture rate against stationary targets. He didn't throw it. He gently tossed it, and it tapped against Yuxi's helmet. The red beam of light was slow, almost lazy, as it absorbed the paralyzed guardian. The ball fell to the ground and did not shake even once. The silence that returned to the grotto was different. It was no longer profound, it was just empty. Ash picked up the ball. The first key was his. He turned and left the empty cavern without a backward glance. Next was Lake Valor, home of Azulf, the being of willpower. It was said that Azulf's spirit gave all living things their will to fight, their determination, their valor. Its defense was to drain an opponent of their drive, leaving them a hollow shell, unable to even lift a Pokeball. Ash's plan was, again, one of supreme, calculated arrogance. He would not fight it at all. He would make his own will the bait. He stood on the muddy shore of Lake Valor, the midday sun strangely warm after the perpetual winter of Lake Acuity. He did not enter the cavern in the center of the lake. He simply stood, closed his eyes, and reached inward. He bypassed the cold logic, the layers of strategy, and found the core of himself. He found the 10-year-old boy in the heart of the storm. He found the burning, blasphemous rage against the silent gods. He found the unbreakable vow he had made in the face of his own mortality. He took that single, perfect, incandescent point of ambition, his will to power, and he projected it. It was not a psychic attack. It was a declaration of existence, a scream of pure, indomitable purpose sent out across the placid water. I am here. My will is stronger than the foundations of this world. I have come to claim what is mine. For a full minute, nothing happened. Then, the surface of the lake began to bubble. In the center, a column of water rose, and from it emerged Azulf. It was similar in form to the other guardians, but its blue, fairy-like body seemed to hum with a dynamic, fierce energy. It did not look at Ash with knowledge or emotion, but with a palpable sense of challenge. It had felt another will, a will of impossible, audacious strength, trying to impose itself on its domain. It had come to test it. A wave of psychic force rolled across the lake, but it wasn't an attack. It was a pressure, a test. It was the question. Are you worthy? It pushed against Ash's mind, seeking to find the cracks, the doubts, the fears. It sought to drain his resolve, to make him kneel. Ash met the pressure with the full, unshielded force of his own will. He did not push back. He absorbed it. He showed the guardian the source of his power. He showed it the sinking ship, the dying mother, the vow forged in rage and grief. He showed it a will that was not pure, not benevolent, but a scarred, jagged, and unbreakable thing that had been pressure-tested in the crucible of absolute despair. Azulf, the embodiment of pure, conceptual willpower, had never encountered a will like this. It was a raw, primal, human thing, and it was overwhelming. The guardian's psychic pressure faltered, like a perfect, clean flame being smothered by a torrent of crude, black oil. It had come to drain Ash's will, but it found that his will was a bottomless, poisoned well. In that moment of psychic recoil, of conceptual confusion, Ash threw his ball. A fast ball, designed for opponents who were quick to flee. It struck Azulf in midair. The guardian vanished in a flash of red. The ball fell into the water with a soft splash and floated on the surface, perfectly still. He had done it. He had captured willpower by overpowering it with his own. He had captured knowledge by showing it the impossible. He now had all three components. Aboard the sanctuary, chaos reigned. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the sterile white bridge. Sir, massive energy spikes detected, first at Lake Acuity, then Lake Valor, a technician shouted, her voice strained. The signatures match the incident at Lake Verity, but, They vanished almost as quickly as they appeared. They're gone, sir. All 3 legendary signatures are gone. Faba stood before the main screen, his face a mask of fury. He has them, he hissed, his voice trembling with rage. The boy has collected them. He's a parasite, hopping from one anomaly to the next, absorbing them. He slammed his fist on a console. No more tracking. No more observation. He is building something. I will not allow it. He turned, his eyes wild with fanaticism, and strode towards the back of the bridge. Commander, final authorization code. Lusamine 0 Alpha. Unseal the Beast Killer. Deploy type. Full. Its directive is simple. Locate the nexus of the 3 energy signatures and sterilize it. Everything in the blast radius is collateral. Burn it all. The commander hesitated for a split second, the sheer ruthlessness of the order giving him pause. But it was a direct authorization from the president's own fail-safe codes. He saluted grimly. Yes, Branch Chief. In the containment bay, the massive cylinder holding type, full hissed open, thick green gel pouring onto the floor. The chimeric creature stepped out, its mismatched limbs moving with an unnatural fluidity. Its heavy helmet glowed to life, a dull, menacing red. A low growl, a sound that was part organic and part machine, echoed in the bay. A god killer had been unleashed. Deep inside Mount Coronet, in a hidden chamber far from the main path, Ash had built his forge. It was a place that defied categorization, part arcane temple, part hyper-advanced laboratory. In the center of the chamber, 3 transparent containment pods hummed with energy. Inside each, a lake guardian floated, unconscious, held in a state of psychic suspension. Ash stood before a strange, circular console that surrounded a raised stone altar. This was his true prize from the Canaliv library. The schematics for a device that could translate conceptual energy into a tangible, physical form. The process must be balanced, he murmured to himself, his fingers flying across the console. Knowledge without will is useless. Will without emotion is aimless. He initiated the first sequence. A thin, silvery beam of light shot from the console and into Yuxi's pod. The Guardian convulsed, and a shimmering thread of pure silver energy, like spun moonlight, was drawn from its body. It was not life force. It was the physical manifestation of its knowledge. The thread snaked through the air and hovered above the altar. Next, Azulf. A burning blue beam drew forth a thread of the same color, crackling with a fierce, dynamic energy. It was willpower, given form. It coiled in the air beside the silver thread. Finally, he turned to the third pod. The one containing Mesprit, the being he had failed to capture. But he had not needed to. The moment he captured its 2 counterparts, Mesprit had appeared before him, not to fight, but to surrender. The 3 were a triad, incomplete without each other. To capture 2 was to capture the third by default. A soft, pink beam drew a volatile, pulsing magenta thread from Mesprit. It was emotion, raw and untamed. It thrashed in the air, a stark contrast to the calm silver and the steady blue. He now had the 3 primary components, but the text was clear. They could not be bound together on their own. They needed a catalyst. A binder. The heart of the void. He placed the dark, pulsing sphere onto the center of the altar. He focused a final, black beam of energy onto it. The sphere cracked open, and from it uncoiled a thread of pure, perfect blackness. It was not a color. It was the absence of color. It did not reflect light, it devoured it. Now, Ash whispered, his eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity. He hit the final command. The 4 threads, silver knowledge, blue will, magenta emotion, and black void, shot towards each other above the altar. When they met, there was no explosion. There was a terrible, silent implosion. The light in the chamber seemed to bend inward, drawn towards the point of their union. The 4 conceptual strands began to twist together, weaving themselves into a single, impossible braid. The black thread of the void acted like a cage, forcing the other 3 volatile concepts to bind, to merge, to become one. The energy in the room was immense, the very air growing thick and heavy. The braid of light began to cool, to solidify. It glowed with a dull, angry red, the color of cooling iron and dried blood. It settled onto the stone altar in 2 distinct pieces. 2 links of a chain, each humming with a power that felt fundamentally wrong, a power that could hold the universe in its grasp. The red chain. He had done it. A triumphant, cold smile touched his lips. He reached for the chain, his fingers brushing against the still warm metal. Boom! The entire chamber shook. The ceiling above him, hundreds of feet of solid rock, exploded inward in a shower of dust and debris. Ash threw himself to the side, shielding his face as chunks of stone rained down around his forge. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. Hovering in the newly created hole, silhouetted against the dark sky, was a creature from a nightmare. Its body was a horrifying chimera. The powerful legs of a land Pokémon, the sharp talons of a bird, a fish-like tail, all stitched together in a way that defied nature. Its head was locked in a heavy, red-eyed helmet. It was type Full. A loudspeaker crackled to life, the sound echoing in the ruined chamber. It was Faba's voice, smug and dripping with contempt. Ash Ketchum. By the authority of the Ether Foundation, your existence, and the existence of the anomalies in your possession, is terminated for the preservation of a stable future. Type Full let out its hybrid, mechanical roar. It dropped from the ceiling, landing with a ground-shaking thud that cracked the altar stone. Its red eyes fixed on the 3 containment pods holding the Lake Guardians, then on the pulsating red chain, and finally, on Ash himself. Its directive was clear. Ash rose to his feet, brushing the dust from his jacket. He looked at the manufactured beast, at the pinnacle of humanity's arrogant attempt to build a weapon that could kill a god. Then he looked down at the red chain in his hand, a weapon he had forged from the very essence of the gods themselves. He held up the crimson links, their dull glow painting his face in a hellish light. Preservation? He said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. You haven't come to preserve the future. You've come to die in it. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The hymn of creation. The battle began not with a roar, but with the cold, analytical hum of a machine choosing its weapon. Type. Full's helmeted eyes glowed red, scanning Ash, the containment pods, and the red chain in his hand. Data scrolled across an internal heads-up display only it could see. Threat levels, energy signatures, structural weaknesses. Its directive was absolute. Sterilization. It moved, a blur of unnatural, stitched-together limbs. It was faster than anything that large and asymmetrical should be. It wasn't charging Ash, but the containment pods holding the Lake Guardians. A primary threat to be eliminated. Kingler. Ash bellowed, throwing the Pokeball. Intercept. Crabhammer. The giant crustacean materialized, its massive claw already raised. It met type Full's charge with a crushing blow aimed at its head. The sound was a deafening clang of organic shell against strange, metallic alloy. The beast killer was knocked sideways, but it didn't even grunt. Its head snapped back into place, the red eyes flickering. It had taken a blow that could shatter steel and had registered it as a data point. A port on its helmet hissed open, and a memory drive, glowing with a faint, ghostly light, was inserted into its RKS system. In an instant, its energy signature shifted. It was now a ghost type. Kingler's follow-up attack, a furious barrage of normal-type vice grips, passed harmlessly through its newly phased body. Calculated counter, Ash murmured, his mind racing. This was not a Pokémon. It was a walking supercomputer of death. Type. Full's own claw, a grotesque combination of talon and blade, glowed with a shadowy energy. It slashed out with Shadow Claw, a move it had just adopted. Kingler roared in pain as the spectral energy bypassed its hard shell and struck its life force directly. Return. Ash commanded, recalling Kingler an instant before a killing blow could land. Pikachu. Volt Tackle. Pikachu was a yellow comet, wreathed in black-tinged lightning. But Faba's voice crackled from a hidden speaker on the beast's back, a sound of smug superiority. Predictable. Electrical energy detected. Activating countermeasure. Ground. Another memory drive slid into place. Type. Full's body took on a dull, earthen tone. It was now a ground type. Pikachu's Volt Tackle, an attack that had staggered champions, slammed into it and fizzled, the electricity harmlessly absorbed. Type. Full didn't even flinch. It simply backhanded Pikachu out of the air, swatting it against the cavern wall like an insect. The cavern shook again, but this time the tremors were from above. Light streamed in as more of the ceiling collapsed. Figures descended into the ruined forge, landing amidst the dust and chaos. Lance, his cape swirling. Stephen Stone, his expression a mask of cold fury. Wallace, Drake, Alder, Diantha, and Cynthia, her Garchomp landing with a ground-shaking thud beside her. The alliance of champions had arrived. They took in the scene with wide, disbelieving eyes. Ash, standing before a strange, arcane altar. The unconscious lake guardians in their pods. And the monstrous, chimeric beast that radiated an aura of pure, clinical death. Ash Ketchum. Lance's voice boomed, filled with righteous fury. Your reign of terror ends now, Dragonite. Wait. Cynthia's voice cut through the tension. Her gaze was fixed on type. Full. That thing, its energy signature is a void. It doesn't feel like a Pokemon. Indeed it is not, champion of Sinnoh. Faba's voice echoed from the creature, tinny and triumphant. What you see is the future. A world corrected. The rampant, chaotic energies of legendary Pokemon are a disease. Subject Ketchum is a symptom. We are the cure. And our work begins by sterilizing this entire, unstable congregation. The final memory drive, one glowing with a brilliant, fey pink, slid into place. Type. Full's type shifted to Fairy. Its eyes glowed, and it unleashed a devastating moonblast. It wasn't aimed at Ash. It was aimed at Lance's Dragonite. The dragon type recoiled with a roar of pain, the super effective energy searing its scales. The choice was made for them. Forget Ketchum, Stephen Stone commanded, his voice ringing with authority. That abomination is the primary threat. Metagross, attack. The cavern erupted into a war zone. The champions, the most powerful trainers in the world, unleashed their aces in a coordinated, beautiful, and utterly terrifying assault. Stephen's Metagross and Diantha's Gardevoir combined their psychic powers, attempting to lock the beast in place. Lance's Dragonite and Drake's Salamence unleashed a dual outrage, a storm of draconic fury. Alder's Volcarona filled the air with a fiery hurricane of heat. It was a symphony of destruction, and it was not enough. Type. Full was a nightmare of adaptability. It shifted, its RKS system swapping types with every attack it analyzed. It became a steel type to wall the dragon assaults, its body shrugging off their fury. It became a dark type to nullify the psychic attacks, the mental force washing over it like water. It moved with a brutal, efficient economy, its multi-attack changing form with its typing. A blade of steel, a blast of fire, a claw of shadow. It fought without passion, without spirit, a perfect engine of combat. It broke through their assault and charged, its target now the red chain that lay on the cracked altar. Protect the chain. Ash roared, not to the champions, but to his own Pokemon. Snorlax, body slam. The giant Snorlax materialized in midair, dropping with the force of a meteor onto type. Full's back. The beast was driven to its knees, the sheer weight and power of the blow causing the ground to crack. For the first time, its mechanical movements faltered. Cynthia saw the opening. Now, Garchomp, Dragon Rush, Lance, Hyper Beam, everyone, full power on its head. It was a moment of perfect, unspoken synergy. The champions, their rivalry forgotten in the face of a common enemy, focused their entire will on a single point. Garchomp became a blue and red missile. Dragonite unleashed a torrent of pure energy. Metagross fired a flash cannon. The combined power of 5 champions struck the helmeted head of type. Full at the exact same instant. The explosion was blinding. The sound was the scream of tortured metal. The entire mountain seemed to groan in protest. When the light faded, type. Full was still standing, but its helmet was shattered, cracked open like an eggshell. The creature beneath was revealed, its true face a bizarre, avian-like head with terrified, organic eyes. The helmet was not just armor, it was a control device. Freed from its psychic dampeners, the creature, now truly a Pokemon known as Silvally, let out a shriek not of rage, but of fear and pain. It was a wild, cornered animal, lashing out in a frenzy. It was no longer a precise weapon. It was a chaotic storm of claws and teeth and desperate, terrified power. And in the heart of that chaos, Ash saw his moment. The others were occupied, locked in a desperate struggle to contain the now unpredictable Silvally. Their power, their rage, their Pokemon's fighting spirit, it was all fuel. The air was thick with a raw, untamed energy that the spear pillar had not felt in millennia. He leapt onto the altar, grabbing the 2 links of the red chain. They felt warm, alive, humming in his hands like living things. He walked past the raging battle, a calm eye in a hurricane of his own making, and climbed the rubble towards the gaping hole in the ceiling, towards the summit, towards the sky. Cynthia was the only one who saw him go. Her heart froze. She was trapped in an impossible choice: help her friends subdue a rampaging monster, or stop the man who was about to commit a crime against creation itself. She made her decision. "Stephen, it's wild. Try to calm it, not crush it," she yelled, her voice a desperate command. "I have to stop him." She disengaged, her Garchomp providing covering fire as she raced after Ash, her heart pounding with a dread colder than any mountain winter. She reached the summit just as Ash took his place in the center of the ruined temple. He stood between the two great pillars that gave the place its name, the red chain held aloft in his hands. The permanent, ugly scar of the distortion world rift still hung in the sky above them, a silent testament to his last transgression. "Ash, don't do this," she pleaded, her voice whipped away by the wind. "You don't know what you're summoning. You don't know what this power will do to you." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were terrifying. They were filled with a light that was not human, a triumphant, fanatical gleam of a zealot on the verge of meeting his God. "I know exactly what it will do," he said, his voice ringing with a strange, resonant power. "It will give me an answer." He slammed the ends of the red chain into the ground at his feet. The two links began to glow, an angry, burning crimson. The energy of the raging battle below, the latent power of the spear pillar, the leaking antimatter from the rift above, the chain drank it all in. It was a key turning in a lock the size of the universe. The sky fractured, not like the chaotic tear of Giratina's arrival. These were two perfect, symmetrical wounds in reality. To the left, a shimmering, crystalline fissure of diamond blue light appeared. To the right, a swirling, opalescent vortex of pearlescent pink. From the fissures, they were pulled. Not summoned, but dragged, their forms torn from their dimensions and forced into the physical world. A great, four-legged beast of blue and silver, its chest plate glowing with the light of a dying star, emerged from the diamond rift. Its roar was a distortion of time itself. Cynthia felt herself age a year and then grow young again in the space of a single, horrifying second. Dialga. From the pearl vortex came a bipedal titan, its pink and white armor gleaming, great pearls embedded in its shoulders. Its roar bent the space around it, the pillars of the temple seeming to stretch and warp as if made of rubber. Palkia. The gods of time and space. And they were enraged. They were shackled, ethereal red chains now visible, linking their bodies to the physical chain in Ash's hands. They fought against the bond, and their struggle was an apocalypse. Time looped and stuttered, space folded in on itself. The very peak of Mount Coronet threatened to tear itself apart. Down below, the battle against Silvally stopped. Champions and Pokémon alike were frozen, overwhelmed by the sheer, reality-breaking presence of the two deities. "You see, Cynthia," Ash yelled over the cacophony of a world being unmade. He was struggling, his body trembling with the strain of holding the chain, of binding two gods to his will. "They are just monsters. Powerful, yes, but they can be chained. They can be controlled." "This isn't control, Ash," she screamed back, tears freezing on her face. "This is madness." "No," he said, a look of sublime, terrible clarity on his face. "This is the hymn." He forced his will down the length of the red chain. He wasn't giving the gods a command to attack. He was giving them a note to sing. Forced against their divine will, Dialga and Palkia tilted their heads back, and from their throats came a sound that was not a roar, but a single, resonant, harmonic chord. It was the sound of creation. The sound of time and space vibrating in perfect, terrible unison. The sound that had begun the universe. The hymn shot upwards, not as a beam of light, but as a wave of pure reality. It struck the heavens, and the sky above the spear pillar, the familiar indigo, the scar of the rift, the very concept of a sky, dissolved. It was replaced by a light. A blinding, impossible, golden white light that was not a color, but the source of all color. It was the light of 1,000 supernovas and the serene peace of the first dawn. From the heart of that light, a path began to form. A staircase of solid, golden light descended, each step settling into place with a chime that resonated in the soul. It was a path from their world to the throne room of its creator. At the top of the stairs, a silhouette began to form. A being of impossible grace and power, its form outlined by a golden, cross-like wheel. Its arrival was not heralded by a sound, but by the sudden, absolute absence of it. The roars of the gods, the howl of the wind, the panicked shouts from below, the frantic beating of Cynthia's own heart, it all vanished, drowned in a silence that was the voice of absolute authority. Arceus had descended. Ash Ketchum stood before it, a mortal man wielding a chain forged from a fallen god, with the masters of time and space bound at his feet. He looked up at the creator of all things, his face not one of awe or fear, but of a challenger who had finally cornered his opponent. The hymn was over. The battle was about to begin. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Obsidian God. The silence was the first attack. It was not an absence of sound, but a presence. A crushing, absolute quiet that was the pure will of the being floating at the top of the golden stairs. Arceus, the Alpha, the architect, did not look at Ash with anger or malice. Its gaze was that of a creator looking upon a flawed, broken line of code in its grand design, a thing to be selected and deleted. It passed its judgment. There was no beam of light, no tangible attack. The very laws of reality that defined Ash Ketchum as a physical entity were simply revoked. The space he occupied began to fray. The atoms of his body forgot how to bind to one another. He felt a horrifying sensation of dissolution, of becoming a meaningless arrangement of particles about to be scattered on the winds of creation. But Ash was ready. He had not come to fight a god. He had come to enslave one. Now, he screamed, not with his voice, but with his will, forcing the command down the length of the red chain. Hold! Dialga roared, and the flow of time around Ash solidified, becoming a crystalline cage that protected him from the present moment. Palkia shrieked, and the space he occupied was locked, its coordinates in the universe suddenly absolute and unchangeable. He was encased in a bubble of rogue physics, a tiny island of defiance against the omnipotent tide of Arceus's will. The strain was inhuman. Blood poured from Ash's nose, and a network of tiny veins broke around his eyes. He felt the minds of the two gods he commanded, vast, ancient, and furious, pushing back against his, threatening to shatter his consciousness into a million pieces. He was a man trying to hold two tectonic plates together with his bare hands. Arceus observed this, its head tilting in a gesture that conveyed a sense of mild, cosmic surprise. Its first attempt at erasure had failed. It changed its methodology. If it could not delete the flaw, it would delete the world the flaw stood upon. It began to unmake. The great white pillars of the temple did not crumble, they turned to mist and vanished. The very peak of Mount Coronet, the stone beneath their feet, began to flatten, to dissolve, its geological history being rewritten into non-existence. The mountain was not being destroyed, it was being uncreated. Down below, in the ruined forge, the champion stared in horror as the world came apart. Stevens Metagross raised a shield of light, but the light itself seemed to thin and dissipate. Alders Volcarona tried to create a protective wall of fire, but the very concept of heat was becoming unstable, the flames flickering between hot and cold. Silvally, the god killer, let out a pathetic, terrified cry. Its programming, its very reason for being, was useless. How do you kill a god that can unmake the idea of a weapon? It turned and fled, a failed experiment running from a truth it could not comprehend. It's erasing everything, Lance yelled, his voice thin in the unraveling air. Cynthia, we have to get out of here. Diantha cried, her Gardevoir creating a warp field that was already starting to collapse. But Cynthia couldn't move, her eyes were locked on Ash. He was staggering now, his body shaking violently, but he was still standing. He was laughing. It was a wild, unhinged sound, the laughter of a man who had pushed all his chips onto the table and was watching the whole casino burn down around him. He saw the unmaking of the world not as a threat, but as confirmation of his entire philosophy, that the architect was a tyrant, willing to destroy its own creation to protect its authority. He knew he could not win this way. He could not out-create the creator. A battle of order against the source of all order was a foregone conclusion. So he would introduce a variable that order could not comprehend. You left one stone unturned in your perfect garden. Ash roared at the silent god. You left a weed in the darkness, and I have brought it back to you. He reached to his belt and pulled out the pulsing, dark sphere he had taken from the heart of the distortion world. The void heart. He didn't throw it, he slammed it down onto the red chain. The sphere shattered, and the essence of Giratina, the pure, conceptual power of the void, of antimatter, of chaos, flooded into the chain. The angry red glow of the lynx was instantly corrupted, turning a sick, violet black. The clean, humming power of time and space was tainted with the screeching wrongness of the world without rules. This was his checkmate, the ultimate act of defiance. He had turned the instruments of creation into conduits of uncreation. The corrupted energy flowed up the chains, into Dialga and Palkia. The two gods shrieked, their bodies spasming as the chaotic energy warped their very nature. Dialga's control over time became a paradox, the past and future began to bleed into each other, and ghosts of long-extinct Pokémon flickered into existence for a half-second before fading. Palkia's mastery of space became a tangled knot, the distance between 2 points became arbitrary, and the sky above seemed to fold in on itself. Arceus, for the first time, acted with something akin to urgency. It was now faced with an impossible dilemma. The God of Order could not allow its two primary lieutenants to become avatars of chaos. If they were left unchecked, their corrupted power would unravel the entire universe, a cancer spreading through the fabric of reality. It had to stop them. It had to turn its divine will away from Ash and focus it entirely on cleansing Dialga and Palkia, on containing the chaos that was now running rampant. And in that moment, its attention divided, it was vulnerable. "It's over," Ash whispered, his voice a raw, bloody croak. The last of his strength was failing. His vision was blurring, but he had one more move to make. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his final gambit. It was not a Pokeball. It was a small, intricate device of his own design, a sphere of interlocking silver rings around a core of pure, solidified energy. A logic cage, a device built not to capture a body, but to trap a concept. He poured the last dregs of his will, the memory of the boy in the storm, the entirety of his burning, blasphemous rage, into this one, final throw. "You never answered my prayer," he screamed, his voice breaking. "So now you will answer to me." He hurled the device. It did not fly towards Arceus's physical form. It flew towards the golden wheel of light that surrounded it, the halo that was the source and symbol of its divine authority. The device unfolded in midair, the silver rings spinning into a complex, shimmering geometric pattern, a cage of pure logic. It wasn't designed to hold a god, it was designed to pose an unanswerable question: what is a god without its power to create? Arceus, its will split between holding back the tide of chaos and defending itself, was caught. The logic cage snapped shut, not on its body, but on its very divinity. The golden light of the Creator did not explode. It simply went out. The silence that followed was one of absolute finality. The staircase of light vanished. The sky, bruised and torn, slowly stitched itself back together. The red chain crumbled to red dust, its purpose served. Dialga and Palkia, freed and scarred, roared one last time before tearing open their own stable portals and retreating to their dimensions to heal. The world, which had been on the verge of non-existence, slowly, painfully, settled. Ash stood alone on the flattened, barren plateau that had once been the peak of Mount Coronet. He fell to his knees, his body finally giving out. In his outstretched hand lay the prize. A single, perfect sphere, about the size of a Pokeball, made of a material that looked like polished, seamless obsidian. It did not glow or hum. It was utterly inert, utterly silent. He held the captured, sleeping concept of God. He had won. He pushed himself to his feet, his body screaming in protest. He looked at his hands. They were thin, the skin strangely translucent, the knuckles gnarled. He felt ancient. The strain of containing gods, of wrestling with reality, had burned through years of his life. He looked out at the world he now commanded. The sky was a sickly yellow. The air felt thin and fragile. The laws of physics, which had been stretched to their breaking point, were now frayed and unreliable. He was the master of all creation. And creation was broken. He saw Cynthia standing at the edge of the plateau, her face pale, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was looking at him with an expression of profound, soul-shattering pity. She did not see a victor. She saw a boy who had sold his soul, his life, his entire world, for an answer to a prayer that should have gone unheard. Ash looked at the obsidian sphere in his hand. The silence from it was absolute. He had the power to remake the world, to heal the scars, to build his perfect, ordered kingdom. He could resurrect his mother. He could erase the storm. He could finally have the control he had craved since he was a helpless child drowning in the dark. But as he stood there, the sole victor on a ruined pinnacle of a fractured world, he felt an emotion he had not allowed himself to feel in 8 long years. It was not triumph. It was not satisfaction. It was an emptiness vaster than the distortion world, a loneliness colder than the space between stars. He had become a god. And he was utterly, irrevocably alone. Chapter 10 End.